Middle of the country, but not middle of the road opinions. It's the podcast dedicated to sports in the air capital of the world.
I'm going to Wichita.
Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. With Tommy Castor and Weston Mills. This is Keeper of the Games.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Keeper of the Games. We are the wildly underqualified yet mildly entertaining podcast that's all about sports in the air capital of Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. I'm Tommy Castor, and I am pleased to welcome you to our first annual holiday extravaganza here on Keeper of the Games. And that just means that we are chock full of content for you on this new episode of the podcast. I'm joined, as always, with Weston Mills. He's here on the podcast, as always. And then it wouldn't be a holiday spectacular without having Blake Cripps here in the house. So first off, Weston, hope you're doing well, my friend.
Hey, it's the holiday extravaganza. I've got which it's hard to tell on the YouTube. This is going to be bad podcast content, but great YouTube content. I got a Surfing Santa Hawaiian shirt on here over the Chiefs Super Bowl tie-dye. So I feel like I have just really embraced my version of Christmas spirit, and I'm ready to rock and roll for this episode.
That's awesome. You're rocking the Surfing Santa. I've got, if you can see this on YouTube, I've got my University of Kansas Christmas sweater that I'm rocking right now. I was telling everyone before we came on the air that I underestimated how itchy it was going to be. So hopefully I will not be scratching myself throughout the entire episode. And then I noticed, Blake, you're not really rocking a Christmas sweater by any means. I'm a little disappointed in you.
No, I already you messaged me about this, and you told me, like, hey, if you want to do something, said, I've already got my shirt picked out, and I do for you. And this is a little early Christmas gift for you.
That's
because
fine.
I think I'm gonna have to get up in the camera on this.
Love
How
it.
about this for a shirt right there?
Wow.
Kansas football, baby, let's go! Worst team ever. How about
There you
that?
go.
Can I scroll down a little bit? There you go. Kansas football, just for you, Tommy. Just a reminder of how crappy this 2020 has really been. I'm here to bring everybody back down to earth. KU football
Next
stinks.
topic.
Glad we covered that. Next topic. Exactly. Yeah, you know who won't also be going to a bowl game this year? KU football.
Well, there
also
you go.
not
And,
going to a bowl this year.
I'm shocked that you're rocking the KU football shirt, but it is what it is. We're glad you're here on our holiday extravaganza of Keeper of the Games. And we're glad that you're listening as well. Just make sure to hit subscribe. That way, anytime we have a brand new episode of the podcast, you will get a notification. You can listen on all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, basically anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. You can find the podcast again on our website. It's brand new, cogsports.com, KOGsports.com. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CogPod. That's at KOG Pod. Like I mentioned, we have a ton of content as this is our final episode of 2020. We're shutting it down. We're wrapping it up for the rest of the year. So we wanted to make sure that we came with a lot of content, a lot of sports topics to talk about today, and some interviews as well. We're really looking forward to the interviews we have coming up. We've got Drew Kelso, who is with One Motive Sports. He's a sports agent. Going to be talking to him in a little while. Also, Clint Dick. He's going to be joining us to talk about Wichita Wind Surge baseball. But we are starting off our show with the voice of the Wichita Thunder hockey team, Jason Malz. He's joining us to talk about what we can expect from the Wichita Thunder season and what things are going to be looking like inside Intrust Bank Arena for the upcoming season. Hey, we're joined right now with Jason Malz. He is the voice of the Wichita Thunder, and the Thunder season is underway now officially. Weston and I talked about it last week on the program that the first game of the season was this past Friday, and so we thought it would be just great timing to have Jason here on the program to talk a little bit about what we can expect from the Wichita Thunder this season, and of course, with some of the news that's been coming out in the last 24 hours about what spectators inside Intrust Bank Arena can have to look forward to this upcoming season. So first off, Jason, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
So like I just mentioned, the Thunder, they have one game under their belts now, and it was a victory. So as at the time of this recording, the Wichita Thunder 1-0. And before we kind of dive into the specifics, let's just talk about a little bit of the overview. What can fans expect from this Wichita Thunder team?
Well, it's really early for me to speculate how this team is going to look on paper when January 1st rolls around. You already saw that this week. The team was assigned 4 players from the Toronto Marlies who have some really good numbers at the junior and college level. So we're really excited to see what these 4 players are going to bring to the roster. But I think the big thing right now is you take a look at how head coach Bruce Ramsey built this team. He brought a good amount of players back, looking for some stability. Guys like Riley Weslowski, Stephen Fournier, Sean Allen, Spencer Dorowitz, and Peter Cronella, to name a few, are back in a Thunder uniform. In talking to him last week, he liked what he saw towards the end of the season, and he wanted to keep the core of the players from last year's team back, which he was able to do. And he also has Mitch Gillum between the pipes, who was a fan favorite and started out with a really solid game on Friday night. He ended up being named the ECHL Warrior Goalie of the Week. So looking forward to see how this team can get prepared for their next game. But the interesting thing, guys, is the Thunder do not play another game until the day after Christmas. So that's 2 weeks off. I don't know the best way to keep a team motivated. Maybe the 3 of you can discuss that on your by yourselves. I don't know what to say in that regard, because that's never happened to us. We've never gone that long without playing a game. But at any rate, got off to a good start, like you said, Tommy, last Friday.
Yeah. So, taking a look at, last season, I know it's been a long time since the Thunder had played hockey. The last game was in the middle of March, and then, obviously everything happened with COVID, and the season was winding, down anyway at that time. What was your assessment, and what was the overall team assessment of the way that the season ended for the Thunder last year? I know that Weston and I, really early on in our podcast, we'd only been doing this for a couple of months, and we were talking about the schedule for the Thunder and some of the results. And it seemed like there was a little bit of a late season slide. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but what was kind of the overall end of year assessment from last year?
Well, we went into the end of the season with a 2-1 record in our last 3 games, played really well up in Kansas City. Unfortunately, that unraveled in Fort Wayne, which was the last game that the team played. It was a tough loss against a very talented Fort Wayne Comet team. I believe the score was 7-2. And as you had mentioned, like you and Weston has discussed, before that stretch, the team had gone on, I believe it was a 6-game losing streak at that point. So at any rate, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier in talking with Bruce Ramsey, the head coach, he had liked what he had seen from his team. They weren't getting the bounces, the puck luck, as it were, which, it's sometimes I like to say, you got to make your own luck, but he did like the direction and the way the team was playing towards the end of the year. It was tough in regards to, we were in Fort Wayne. We were supposed to go and play in Toledo on that Friday, then go to Cincinnati Saturday, and then play Fort Wayne on Sunday. Unfortunately, we ended up jumping on the bus and headed home, and it was somewhat of a shock to all of us that the season ended the way it did. And then the players, I'm not sure how much you guys were familiar with how things unfolded for them in the off season, but they were left without paychecks for 5 to 6 weeks because we were supposed to be playing another month and a half. And unfortunately, they're without a job. So
Right.
That's something else that we can talk about, but it was a tough way to end the season. You never want to see something like that unfold, but we all understood exactly why the league decided to make the decision it did.
Jason, I've been pretty open on this podcast that I grew up a Thunder fan, went to all sorts of games. I had a cousin that he played hockey, so it was just so much fun to go with him. I didn't grow up playing hockey, but kind of after my childhood, I kind of lost touch with the Thunder, and admittedly, I don't know exactly, a whole lot about where the season's going this year. But so let me ask some questions for those fans, because I know there's a lot of us out there that, maybe don't follow the day-to-day, but boy, Thunder games are just a blast to go to. So tell us a couple players that we really are looking at, that you're going to notice this season. And then maybe aside from that, what are the teams that we're looking at that, hey man, that's going to be a great matchup against them. They're looking to lead the league this year. Kind of give us that little preview if you can.
Sure. I think I'm excited about how a guy like Peter Cronella is going to, develop heading into his sophomore season. He played really well for the most part in sporadic appearances last year. Towards the beginning of the season, he was in and out of the lineup. Coach had mentioned that he liked the way he performed on the power play, but wasn't sure he trusted him on the penalty kill, but he was able to kind of fill into that role towards the end of the season. So he's a guy that I'm really eager to see how he's going to develop heading into his second year as a professional. I mentioned Stephen Fournier. He's a fan favorite, had a career season last year in goals and points. Stephen is our player assistant coach, and he is just the type of leader that you want for your hockey team. He goes out there, and not only does he score, he protects his teammates. He'll drop the gloves if he needs to. At this point in his career, he's not really interested in doing that as much, but he will. So he's another guy I think the fans should really look out for. In regards to the 4 guys that we just received from the Toronto Marlies of the American Hockey League, one of the players that we got, I'm really eager to see, because I played defense when I was younger. I played hockey myself, and I always like to watch defensemen and see how they are on the ice. And Noel Hoffenmeyer is a guy that I think fans are really going to enjoy. I watched some of his highlights yesterday and putting together the highlight reel for him that we put out on Facebook. And he had 80 points in 56 games, I believe it was, last season for the Ottawa 67s. He won CHL, which is the Canadian Hockey League Defenseman of the Year, has a lot of accolades on his resume. So excited to see how he's going to turn it into a pro. Those are a couple of names that I would suggest that fans look out for. And then we do have a defenseman that the team signed. I know that Thunder fans love the rough stuff. Weston, you mentioned that you were a longtime fan.
Yeah.
Had come to games, way back when. Matthew Gagnon is going to fill that role for you. He's one of those players that will drop the gloves whenever he wants to. He's a tough customer. He was overseas last year, but Thunder fans do know who he is because he played for Tulsa about 3 years ago, and he, in fact, got into a fight with one of our old tough guys, Eric Lizon, and that was an interesting fight. You can go Google it and see how he performed. So those are a couple of players, Weston and I would suggest that you pay attention to.
And I'm
Jason,
glad you
with everything going on right now in coronavirus, the East Coast Hockey League obviously has changed up the schedule. Talk about some of the scheduling procedures that are going to be different this year, because I know in the past you guys have played a lot of split type of series where you go someplace, play 2 games, come back on the weekend. Looking at the schedule this year, not as much of that. So talk about the schedule, which is not fully released. It's only out through February 6th right now, when we can expect the rest of the schedule, and what coronavirus procedures the East Coast Hockey League is putting in place for the teams this year.
Sure. The one problem I know that the league had to deal with before the season started with the situation in Sedgwick County that hurt our home game attendance numbers at the time. So we had to move 3 home games that we had in December into January or further beyond that. So that's part of the reason why we don't even have a home game until January 1st, which is our home opener on New Year's Day. And I know our general manager, Joel Lamerno, was very involved in dealing with that situation with the health department and everybody with the Sedgwick County Commission. It certainly was having us sit on pins and needles there, Blake, because there was a time we didn't even know if we were going to play. Because as you're aware, they didn't want to have sporting venues that didn't have, I think, 25 or more people in group outings. And we've been working back and forth with the Health Commission, with the Sedgwick County commissioners and everybody else that's involved with that. And they came to a decision that we would have 11% capacity with all the protocols in place. Now, getting back to your question in regards to the scheduling and how it would be different, like you mentioned, yes, there's going to be situations where they're trying to limit the amount of travel that teams are doing so they're not getting themselves exposed as much as they normally would be. So they're going to have what they call games that are in pods. You're going to play a 3-4 or a 3-3, 2 games on a weekend against the same opponent. You're not going to have a situation where you play a Kansas City on a Friday and then you play Tulsa on a Saturday. That's something that's going to have to be moved to the following season. And then you're mentioning the ECHL protocols. I mean, there's way too many to list. There's a huge protocol manual that they put out that was COVID related. Like, for instance, the lower level of Intrust Bank Arena is off limits for everybody but people that are in the quote unquote bubble. So only players and coaches, trainers, and the equipment people that are involved or in what they are considering the bubble are allowed down there. With the fans itself, going to the games, they have to wear masks. They're required by Intrust Bank Arena. We're going to have sanitizing stations all around the arena itself. And the way the seating bowl is going to look is going to be a lot different than you normally would see, with all the different people distanced away from each other in the seating bowl. And I hope I answered your question as best I could.
Hey, Weston, was there something you wanted to follow up with Jason about prior to that question about the procedures?
Well, like usual, I was going to talk about myself a little bit. I was just going to, Jason, I was just going to tell you, I'm glad that you brought up, and it was Matthew Gannon, right? Was that his name?
Matthew Gagnon?
Gagnon.
Yep.
I'm
Gagnon.
glad you brought him up, because my next question was going to be about who was going to throw the gloves down, because while like I said, my knowledge of hockey was from growing up at Thunder games as a kid, as equally as much I've learned about hockey from watching all the Mighty Ducks movies. So that was my next question. I'm glad that you brought that information. What and as I know you've been talking about, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Kansas City. What is the one team that is really going to be that go-to game this year for the Thunders that fans would really want to get out to? Now, I know all of them are a great time and this and that, but what's the one matchup that you're really looking at that will be a fun game?
Sure. Yeah, I forgot to answer that question for you, so I apologize.
No
always
worries.
recommend the Allen Americans. Is typically been our fiercest rival over the last couple of years. We played them in the 2012 CHL finals. Unfortunately, that's a memory I want to forget. But Steve Martinson, the head coach of Allen, has always had a really solid team down there. Those games are usually very competitive. They get really rough. A couple of years ago, in fact, not last year, but the year before that, we had our last game of the season against them, and there was a bench clearing brawl. And I have video of it if you ever want to watch it. It was crazy. The goalies got into it. I mean, it was a mess. I haven't seen something like that for a long time, but we've always had really, really physical games against the Allen Americans. And this year they might have one of the best teams in the league. I've looked at their roster. There's a couple of teams that are really stacked this year with the amount of players that are looking for jobs versus the amount of jobs that are available. You're going to be able to find better players this season. So that's a team that I'm really intrigued to see how they're going to be and how we play against them this season.
We're talking to Jason Nels, who is the voice of the Wichita Thunder here on Keeper of the Games. And Jason, going back to the topic of the procedures in place at Intrust Bank Arena and the fact that this will be the first event that Intrust Bank Arena will have their doors open for since the COVID-19 pandemic started back in March. What does that mean emotionally, do you think, for the players, the coaches, the staff? I know it's only 11%, but to have some of the Thunder faithful be able to watch them play. I'm like Weston. I grew up going to the Kansas Coliseum, watching the Wichita Thunder, and it was just always rocking with fans and just the excitement level and the energy level. I know it's going to be different, but it's got to be a positive to at least have some fans able to watch what's going on.
Yeah, I think we're very blessed to even be playing this season. If you look around minor league sports or even sports in general, there's teams that have opted out. We're one of just 13 teams right now, possibly 15, but just one of 13 teams at the moment that are actually playing hockey, which, like I said, I feel extremely blessed. Thanks to our owner, Rodney Steven, who he didn't want to shut down. He made the decision that he wanted us to play. He could have said, you know what, we're going to opt out, and there's not going to be hockey in Wichita until October, possibly next November. But, it's definitely something that it's going to be unique. It's going to be different. Our fans have always been some of the loudest and craziest fans around minor league sports. We won, I think, 8 years in a row in the CHL, the most obnoxious fans award. So as you can tell, I mean, you guys have been to the games, you know how they get. I think for the fans, it's more important than it is to the players and the staff. I get it. I mean, everybody is really excited to be getting going and getting Interest Bank Arena open, but I'm more excited for the fans. I mean, they haven't been to a home game in over 300 days. I mean, think about that. We haven't had a home game at Interest Bank Arena since late February. There's just so much going on in the world right now that's just so negative. And for us to be able to bring an opportunity, a couple of hours for them to escape that and just have a good time, forget about the negative and focus on, enjoying a hockey game, I think that means the world to us as a staff, as the players and the coaches.
Jason, last year you guys went 24-38 overtime losses. You were really good in Wichita, going 17-9 with 3 overtime losses, but you guys had the worst record in the league on the road at 7-21-5. Obviously, the road challenge and the home ice advantage is going to be a little bit different this year, but what does the team need to do to get better on the road and get more wins on the road this season?
Well, I do want to thank you for bringing that stat up. I tried to forget it. That's always a hard question for me to answer. I ask Coach all the time, why do you think the team performed better at home as opposed to on the road? Because sometimes when you're on the road, you're away from distractions, you're with your teammates. Sometimes it could be a better situation. You don't have to worry about trying to get tickets for your family or your friends. Hockey is just such a weird animal because in the NHL, home ice advantage really means nothing. But in minor league hockey, home ice advantage is such a big thing. Now, what does the team need to do better on the road? I think stay out of the penalty box. We've got to be better on special teams, and we got to do a better job of limiting shots. Our shots against on the road was near the bottom of the league. Our special teams got better as the season wore on. Our penalty kill was not that great last year, but our power play really improved over the course of the season. So just a couple of things I think that the team needs to do a better job of that. And the other thing, I think the third period was really our downfall. We really struggled in the third period last year away from home. So hopefully the team can do a better job. They have already gotten off to a good start with that win against Tulsa. Unfortunately, the team was up 2-0 in that game, Blake, and ended up going into a shootout. So,
right.
I mean, they won the shootout, but yeah, that like I said, they've got to do a better job of protecting the lead.
Hey, Jason, one thing that you can always count on Blake for is to just depress you. Just to bring up things that you don't really want to know about or that you wanted to forget about. Like, you can always do that.
Depressive stats.
What's that?
I was just going to say depressive stats, depressive teams. Blake is the expert, I'd say, in that field.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a follow-up question for you, Malzy, that you're also not going to like to hear. And I know that you're well aware, and I'm sure the Thunder players are trying to forget that you guys had the most goals allowed in the division and the second most goals allowed in the conference last year. You mentioned limiting shots, and I like hockey. I watch hockey. Cannot skate to save my life. So I have no idea about moving around on the ice. There's a better chance of me dying than actually being able to skate across the rink. But you talked about limiting shots, which I feel is really interesting thing to say because, in hockey, you can technically shoot the puck from anywhere. How does a defense limit shots, and is that one of the things that Wichita needs to do or maybe didn't do last year that maybe would have made up the difference in some of those games? What is the team working on to get better defensively for this season?
Well, the personnel is number one. I think we're a lot stronger defensively this year at this point than we were towards the middle of last season. We've got, like I mentioned earlier, Matthew Gagnon, who's a solid defenseman. Jacob Graves is back. We picked him up in the middle of the season. He really solidified our blue line last year. We were really young last season on the blue line and had some guys that were sent down from Bakersfield, but they didn't stick around all that long. Vincent De Haarnae is a guy that I thought really excelled towards the end of last season. Not sure where he sits in terms of his playing status because he's on an American Hockey League contract with the Bakersfield Condors. Now, in regards to strategy, Coach likes to do what he calls is protect the house, as it were. Keep players to the outside, not allow the puck to get funneled into the middle where that better scoring area is going to be. And then our goaltender, Mitch Gillum, like I said, he saw way too many shots last year. You had mentioned what shots against, and I can't remember the number you just said. It was above 30 shots a game. That's just too many, Blake. You got to do a better job. I think he mentions he wants to keep it under 30 a game. And those are some things that I think the team is working on, is doing a better job with their defensive structure and with the better personnel. I think it's going to help this year.
Well, Jason, before we let you go, taking a look at the upcoming schedule for the Thunder, they're on the road at Kansas City. You mentioned the day after Christmas and then playing New Year's Eve at Allen. Then the home opener is back on New Year's Day versus Allen, and then again on the second against Allen. For those fans that are not part of the 11% that are going to be able to be inside Intrust Bank Arena or for any of the away games, how can they follow your coverage? What's the best way for them to follow all the Thunder action all season long?
Well, sure. First and foremost, I want to just make sure that when you say 11%, we're going to make sure that we get or do our best to get all the season ticket holders in the arena. And after that, there will be some tickets available to the public. They will be limited, and they possibly will be in the upper bowl. However, I mean, what's the other alternative? Not having hockey at all. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. If there's season ticket holders that are watching this, that they know that we're going to do our best to get them taken care of. If you cannot make it to a game, we're on a new service this year. It's called Flow Sports. Flow Sports has what I want to say it's an annual membership. It's a little bit different than what we had last year with New Line Endeavor streaming. Essentially, you buy the full year package and get all the content on their platform, and you can watch any ECHL game. And I think it's like $140. And they have auto racing, they have college hockey. There's a bunch of stuff that's on that platform. So if you want to watch the road games or even the home games, if you can't make it, that's an opportunity for you. And I also am streaming off of an app called the Sinbin or Mixler, and you just go to the Mixler search bar and type in the Sinbin, and you should be able to find their channel. So those are a couple of ways for people to be able to follow.
Well, I don't know if I speak for Weston or Blake, or if I'm probably just speaking for myself because that's kind of the way I do things. But I think that here on this podcast, we need to do a better job of focusing on Wichita Thunder hockey. It's easy, I know, for Weston and I to talk football and talk basketball and that sort of thing. But when we've got such a great product, in our backyard, we need to do a much better job, especially in 2021, of covering the Thunder. And so with that, we'd love to have you back. We'd love to, hopefully have one of the coaches or maybe a player or two join us here on the podcast sometime in the future to talk about the season, if that'd be cool.
Of course. Weston, did you have a question?
I do. I want the last question. And Jason, I'm going to put you on the spot because I've been admittedly the guy who hasn't been to a Thunder. Actually, it's only been a couple years, but, I've been a little bit out of touch. So I want to know two things because I think there's going to be a lot of people listening that also want to know this. Can you tell me the price of a beer and tell me the price of a hot dog?
Last season, I believe a beer was about $8 and a hot dog was $2.50 or $3.
I'm in.
Is that good enough for you?
I'll be there. You got me.
Hey, it was a pleasure, Tommy and Blake. Of course, I know both of you guys for a long time. Thank you so much for the invitation. And Weston, great to meet you. Hopefully, when we
Absolutely.
get the opportunity to open to more people, all three of you can come out to a game and you can join me on the intermission or something like that. But again, thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
That'd be awesome. Thank you
Good
so much,
season,
Jason.
Mousy.
Yep, absolutely. It's Jason Miles. He is the voice of the Wichita Thunder here on Keeper of the Games. Our big thanks to Jason Miles again for joining us here on Keeper of the Games, talking about the Wichita Thunder, and we'll have more information on them on future episodes of the podcast. Let's get into some Kansas City Chiefs football. So it was another tight game towards the end for the Chiefs on Sunday as they traveled down to Miami to take on the Dolphins, who are actually a pretty good football team with Tua Tagovailoa under center there for the Dolphins. It really wasn't a super close game for much of the game until the fourth quarter, when the Dolphins cut the lead and put a little bit of pressure on Kansas City, but the Chiefs ended up getting the victory and leaving Miami clinching the AFC West. So Weston, I'll start with you. Your thoughts, your opinions, your takeaways from the Chiefs going down to Miami and getting that win against the Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just like you mentioned, Miami's a good team, right? I mean, and I think a lot of people were starting to realize that, but this defense it's a very good defense. So to see, and then really the takeaway on the Chiefs side is to see what the Chiefs offense can do in the blink of an eye. You know, Miami goes up 10-0. Kansas City starts to come back. Second half opens up. And all of a sudden, this game felt like it was out of hand. We got to 30, it was 30-10 at one point. And we're thinking, oh, how did we even, what happened? How did we get here? And that's just the way this Chiefs offense can just absolutely explode at times. But like you mentioned, very impressed with Miami, the way that they played. And I think they're going to be making some noise really in the AFC moving forward. And it went as far as I saw an article, and I'm going to say Dan Orlovsky, but I'm not positive. Someone suggested that they saw Tom Brady / Patrick Mahomes type moments out of Tua Tagovailoa. So I think that's an interesting, something to keep an eye on as, the league develops, as Kansas City really moves forward. Who are going to be those quarterbacks that really grow in this next decade of football with Patrick Mahomes as the rivals? You had Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, you had, Brett Favre, Dan Marino. It just seems like there's always this transition of guys that are competing against each other, whether they come up right about the same time or not. And we're going to be looking at who that is to kind of be that, I don't know, rival quarterbacks goofy, because obviously the quarterbacks don't actually face each other, but you know what I'm saying. And it'll be curious to see if Tua can grow into being that quarterback.
Well, you mentioned, Weston, that at one point the score was 30-10 in favor of the Chiefs. The final score was 33-27. So the Dolphins got right back into the game in the fourth quarter. A lot of that due in part to the offense for Miami, and of course their defense for some turnovers as well. Blake, what were your takeaways from that game?
I'd slow down a little bit on Tagovailoa being Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. Right now, in terms of quarterback efficiency, the closest comparison that you have is Cam Newton and Mitchell Trubisky. So let's just reel in on Tagovailoa a little bit. The Chiefs running the football, I think is going to be a concern. There was some talk on Twitter about how, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is like the worst pick ever in the first round. Like, I don't know if I'm willing to go that far, but the Chiefs were not good on first and second down. They haven't been great on first and second down in a lot of games this year. They actually had negative expected points added on first and second down against Miami, 15th in rushing EPA this year. So I think for Kansas City, when you can run the football late in games, that allows you to maintain the lead. You're picking up first downs. The clock is moving. There's always that risk with an offense like Kansas City. You can put up points in a hurry, or you can go 3 and out in a hurry. But obviously, anytime that you can win, anytime that you can come back from 10-0 down, obviously very, very happy with how the Chiefs can score quickly, but it would be nice if Kansas City could put teams away defensively. And obviously, you don't want to ever get outscored I think it was 17-3 in the fourth quarter. You would expect that Kansas City would not be able to be held to a field goal in a quarter. So, it's a high risk, high reward type of offense. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is not going to throw for 3 interceptions probably ever again this season, maybe not ever again at his career at the rate he's going. But there was positive and negative, but obviously when you're 12-1 and you're the defending Super Bowl champions, you're in a pretty good spot.
I am shocked that, I'm asking for takeaways from both of you guys, and we don't talk about the biggest takeaway of all. And I'm the one that has to bring it up. And that's Patrick Mahomes is human, right? I mean, he had a human day.
I brought it up.
You didn't really talk about it.
I said he had 3 picks. What else do you want me to say?
I'm not ready to acknowledge that yet.
He had a human performance against Miami. It didn't mean that he was bad. I mean, the guy still threw for I don't know how many yards. I mean, over 300
almost
yards.
400.
Almost 400 yards. I mean,
393, yeah.
He still had a great game through the air, and there just were the interceptions, and I thought that this stat was staggering to me. Did you guys know this was the first time that a Chiefs quarterback threw 3 interceptions in a game in 7 years? And Alex Smith did it one time during his tenure in Kansas City, and that was the very first game of the 2014 season. That just puts it into context how odd the performance was. And, when you watch him play, the fact that he only threw 2 interceptions going into this game, he threw one, just one interception. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. Like, it's weird that he even threw one interception, much less the second one and then the third one. But even going beyond that stat, how insane is it that the Chiefs gave up the ball 4 times, only forced 1 turnover themselves, and won the football game? And up until in part of the fourth quarter, it wasn't even a contest. They were up by 3 scores. It just shows how impressive this team is, that they can give up the ball 4 times and still nearly comfortably win a football game.
Well, and that's the thing about great teams, right? Great teams always find a way to win. And I think if you go back to talking about Patrick Mahomes' performance too, if you look at this, and I don't think there's much chatter about anybody actually, thinking Pat actually played bad, this or that. But I mean, if you look at those interceptions, right? I mean, one of them was a tipped ball. Did Pat throw it a little bit high to Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Yeah, it was a little high, but tipped in, who 9 times out of 10, that ball's, tipped and nothing happens with it. It just happened to fall in the hands of the defender. I think the other one was a drop pass, and I can't remember was it, again, ball thrown a little bit behind a receiver, and I can't remember now which receiver that was, and then picked off kind of the deflection there. And then the third one being an outstanding play by one of the best corners in the league, Xavier Howard, in the end zone there. So, it's nothing really to be concerned about, but I do think, going back to Blake's comment about the running game, that's something that I think, you want to see the Chiefs be able to do that. Everybody says you get to win in January and February, you got to be able to run the football. That's an old saying. I don't know if it's true. It does seem to, I still think there's some merit to it. But you got to think what the Chiefs have been doing with this running game and what Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been dealing with. I mean, we're still without Mitchell Schwartz at the right tackle, one of the best right tackles in all of football. Started the season without Lawrence Duvernay-Tardif, who probably would have been a starting guard. We're without Kelechi Osemele, who stepped in for him and is probably the best run blocking offensive lineman on this unit. And then on top of that, this offensive line was built to protect Patrick Mahomes, with that being the first priority, not to run the football. Of course, you want your offensive lineman to be able to do that, but priority 1 was getting guys that could help this pass game and protect Patrick Mahomes. So with all that being said, I'm not overly concerned with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but you do want to see a better performance on the ground. And ultimately I think, even though we haven't seen a whole lot out of him, I think having Le'Veon Bell is going to be that experience, that a little extra, you can keep guys fresh. in January and February when it's cold, it's tired, those hits hurt just a little bit harder. So while it's something to watch, I'm not overly concerned about it. But I do think that might very well be kind of the top issue for the Chiefs right now.
Well, not only that, but Damian Williams was supposed to be the running back on this team
Right.
too, so it wasn't supposed to be the CEH show either. And going back to what Tommy said, the other thing too is we do have to give, I think, Miami a little bit of credit because they are, you look at the efficiency ratings, they're ranked as the third best drop back pass defense in the league. Xavier Howard with another interception. He's been really good for them. So, give the Miami secondary some credit. They're a good unit. They're really tough against the pass. And so it's not surprising to me that Patrick Mahomes, if you're going to have a multi-turnover game, it's probably going to come against a team like Miami.
I'm not one. I'll be the first one to admit I am not nearly as knowledgeable as guys like Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy as far as play calling is concerned.
Sure.
That's the understatement of the year, by the way.
I think that's what the Open says, mildly unqualified, something like
Yeah.
wildly underqualified.
Yeah.
But
I was being nice for the holiday.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I will say, just from looking at Chiefs social media, there's a pretty decent contingent, and there always have been, of Chiefs fans that either are critical of the play calling being what they might call too cute, and then also people too critical of the play calling being too conservative. And it kind of is both, and I've seen, and I've found myself getting angry at the play calling, sometimes where, do we really need all this window dressing and this really cute, reverse tosses to the tight end who's going to throw it to, the quarterback and do we really need all of that when you've got all this talent on the field? But then on the flip side, I found myself being frustrated also with play calling, especially late in the game when the Chiefs are ahead. And you want the Chiefs to put their foot on the throat of the other team. And it just usually doesn't happen that way. We've seen several games in a row now where it almost looks like Kansas City has a hard time totally putting teams away, going in for the kill, going for the jugular, winning by double digits. And I don't know if it's just a coincidence that that's where we're at right now, or if it's a sign of where this team is at, where they're just having a hard time fully putting teams away. And I don't know if either one of you have any opinions on that.
Yeah, I think this is my biggest criticism of Andy Reid. And he's obviously one of the greatest coaches of all time. So I'd obviously take that with a grain of salt. But this has been a knock on him for his career. He gets very conservative. He takes the foot off the gas in those moments, and I can understand as a coach, to kind of play the numbers right and like, look, if I go 3 and out, but I eat up, however much, 2 minutes and 30 seconds at the clock, well, maybe that was worth it. But it feels like we should be far enough along with Patrick Mahomes that Andy Reid should be adjusting to go, okay, I've got the best quarterback in the league and maybe one that is going to be the best of all time when it's all said and done. Maybe I can trust him late in the game when we're trying to burn up clock to run, have 4 routes run on 2nd and 6 and trust that he's going to make the play, make sure he's going to hit the open guy, as opposed to maybe, second quarter, he takes a shot down the middle of the field on a post to Tyreek. He's smart enough, accurate enough, a good enough quarterback to find that check down guy and go, okay, it's late. We're trying to get some clock in, burn that down. You'd think that we would be there yet. We don't see that out of Andy Reid. That's my frustration. The too cute stuff doesn't really bother me. I think it's one of those things as fans, the same fan who's upset that it's, too cute by the end zone or this or that, is the same fan who's just beside themselves when one of those plays works. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of that. And that's an instance where I think, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, that offense as a whole has been given the leeway to kind of try some of that stuff that they think is fun, and ultimately, like, being a player's coach to some degree is letting that kind of stuff happen. Andy Reid was talking about on one of the shows I was listening to, or maybe it was Patrick was talking about that Coach Reid lets the guys come to him with ideas. They'll give it a try in practice, and he likes it. Maybe, and obviously I think Patrick mentioned that you take a play to Coach Reid, he'll tweak it to make it, work the way he wants it to work. But, I think players respond to that kind of, I don't know, ability, responsibility, the ownership they can take in this team. I think the players love that. And that's part of the song and dance of, yes, this coach is calling plays, directing this team, but he's also managing people and talent, right? And that's part of the job is kind of letting them have a little fun and feel like they have ownership in what's going on. So it doesn't bother me one bit.
No, those people who complain about the play calling, in general, if you want to complain about a specific play at a specific time, situation, down and distance, that's fine. Has anybody else thrown for 4,000 yards this year so far? I believe an answer. No. 6.6 yards per play.
No.
It's number one in the league. How about expected points? Number one in the league. Number of first downs, Chiefs. Yeah, forgot number one in the league. Yeah, they're average rushing the ball, but like if you look at these statistics, like what are you talking about? Like just stop. There are, they have the most yards, best yards per play, best yards, net yards per attempt passing, most first downs, most expected points. Like, just be quiet. Just be quiet and be thankful that your heart's not getting ripped out by the Buffalo Bills each and every season these days, okay? Just be quiet. That's not a hot take. That is the furthest thing from a hot take since you've started that stupid horn.
I think the hot take horn has shifted into the Blake's on a rant horn, and then just really anytime anyone's on a rant horn, now it's turned into the Blake rant. You get the Blake rant horn.
I'm glad I could provide, the brevity that the show needs.
Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying. I do think that you've got, a contingency out there of fans that the Chiefs will get 10 yards and they want them to get 15. They get 30 yards. They should have gotten 40. They score 35 points. Why didn't they score 42?
Patrick Mahomes doesn't throw the ball down the field enough.
Right. But I do think that I get where you're coming from with the too cute stuff. Occasionally I'm like, did you need to do it that way, or can you just run the play? But at the same time, I get why they're doing it. I understand the rationale behind it. But I do think that there is a legitimate, I don't even really want to say concern, but just something to keep in mind when you get late in the game with this Chiefs team this season. At least in the last several games, I don't want to say they have a hard time putting teams away, but let's just look at the final score from these games. After the Jets game, which does, obviously the Jets are terrible, but the Chiefs only beat the Panthers by 2. They only beat the Raiders by 4. The Buccaneers by 3.
Raiders are not a bad team.
The Broncos by 6. And
the
then
Broncos aren't a good team.
And then the Dolphins by 6. So they've not won a game by more than 6 points in the last 5 games they've played. That's not a bad thing. They got wins, but even in the case of like the Dolphins game, it was not nearly as close as what the final score would indicate. But I think when you get late into the season, and especially into the playoffs, you've got to have that second gear of being able to put the game away when necessary. We just haven't really seen that as much, kind of that killer instinct, in my opinion, over the last several weeks.
And I think that goes back to, we were talking about in Blake's comment about, judging the play calling. Blake mentioned, hey, look, if you're talking about situational football, okay, that's a little bit different conversation than just questioning their play calling as a whole. And I think that's kind of, where I'm focused is the situational football, how it just kind of seems so predictable, right? And we talked last weekend, and I'm holding my breath to even mention KU football, that Blake just doesn't go off. But I got very upset with situational play calling by Brent Dearman in that game at the end of KU's last game. And I think that's
the play calling was bad. What?
Yeah. I was careful. I didn't know if I wanted to go there, but going back to Kansas City, it's that same, situational football where you feel like it's so predictable, right? Like Andy Reid gets in the zone of, he goes up and he just wants to run the football, not be overly creative with running the football. And it's predictable, and you see it every time, and I just think, and I've said this many times, I truly do think Andy Reid hides his playbook. I absolutely think he does that. He doesn't want to put stuff on tape. And here, as someone who's not watched the game field or has no inside knowledge, it's hard for me to say, okay, is against Miami, was he just being too conservative and he still hasn't figured out that he needs to trust Andy Reid, or I'm sorry, to trust Patrick Mahomes? Or, is he purposefully saying, okay, look, I want to run the football. Of course, I'm running to get first downs. I'm never not trying to do the things we need to do, but I'm not ready to open up the playbook. We're 12-1 or 11-1 at the time, and winning that Super Bowl is more important than opening up every single play that's going to be on tape and ultimately hampers us later on down the road. I think that has to play some part into it. And then the other part, like I said, I do think there's a portion that he just needs to trust Patrick Mahomes to continue to run the normal offense in those situations in which we're trying to run out the clock, and know that Patrick's going to find the guy that's open and keep those chains moving.
I would not be surprised if this has to do with last season, honestly. Keeping Patrick Mahomes healthy is also a priority in it for a 12-1 team.
Yeah.
He can get blown up on any kind of a play. Look at last year. Look at all the criticism. Why would you have Patrick Mahomes run a quarterback sneak? Which the quarterbacks barely ever get hurt on a quarterback sneak. Patrick Mahomes happened to. So let's keep this multi-million-dollar guy around. Let's keep him safe. He's not going to get hurt handing the ball off, probably. I mean, on a screen pass, it's possible. Is it low likelihood? Yes. But with the 12-1 season, that could also be a part of it, I think. Just, you know what? We don't need to take a chance with Patrick Mahomes' health right now. Let's just hand it off. Let the running back take the brunt of it. Let the offensive line block, and let's move to the next game and see if we can just make it. And it's a tough act. It's a tough act to balance, because you don't ever want your team to be in the mindset of, well, we just got to protect this guy and we're only going to run these plays to keep this guy safe. But if I would be surprised that's not in the back of the mind of him and Eric Bieniemy right now, especially, locking up the division and, getting close to that first round bye.
I think that's the first time I've ever felt like someone has referred to an individual as a multi-million-dollar man, and me feel like that's underselling the worth of an individual. So,
Maybe.
I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Kansas City defense. And it's been an ongoing theme, Weston, for the last 3 or 4 weeks on this podcast. We've constantly, week in and week out, at least I have, said, where is the pass rush? Where are these guys? And they finally showed up against Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins on Sunday. 4 sacks for the Kansas City defense. And the two guys that we have talked consistently about, Frank Clark and Chris Jones, each had a sack, as did Mike Dana and Tershawn Wharton had a sack as well for Kansas City. And then you add on that interception from Tyrann Mathieu. It was not the best defensive outing for Kansas City, especially considering the 17 points that Miami scored in the fourth quarter. But it was refreshing, at least to me, to see the pass rush finally show up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, I've been adamant about, Frank Clark has got to play to his contract's worth, right? I mean, Chris Jones, I feel like he's still even underplaying his a little bit, but he's had a much better season, in my opinion, than Frank Clark. But, I'm glad that this is a perfect time to mention this, as Frank Clark gets a sack, Chris Jones gets a sack, and then the other two guys that get a sack are maybe two of our best playing defensive linemen right now in Tershawn Wharton and Mike Dana. And what fantastic ads by Brett Veach. I mean, you got Tershawn Wharton out of Missouri S&T, who was, I believe he was undrafted. Does anybody have that in front of him? I think he was undrafted. And then Mike Dana, I know he was a 5th round pick out of Michigan. I mean, talk about a couple diamonds in the rough here for Brett Veach to really jump in and help with this defensive line when we needed it. Sadly, some of the best play has come from two of the guys that were two of the most unheralded coming into the season.
Yeah, Tershawn Wharton did go undrafted. He's a undrafted rookie for Kansas City. But no, I definitely agree with you. Just the fact that, week in and week out, we said, look, they're paying Chris Jones and Frank Clark. They made a financial commitment to both of those guys, especially Chris Jones, before the season started. And as we get down in the final stretch of the regular season, they need those guys to step up and perform. And we hadn't seen that, over the last several weeks. In fact, there were a couple of games where, not only were there no sacks, but there were hardly any quarterback hurries. There were hardly any quarterback hits. There was nothing coming from the pass rush at all. And so for me, in my opinion, it was great to see that. And especially knowing that, those guys who should be the cornerstone of your defense, your highest paid guys in Jones and Clark, are finally starting to show up a little bit.
Yeah, and I will mention too, last week, I think you asked maybe the question, Tommy, if the Chiefs were missing Emmanuel Ogbah, which is interesting as we now played Emmanuel Ogbah, and actually very quiet performance out of him. And I'm not suggesting that this was an answer to your question, but only had one tackle on the day, and that was pretty much it. So still, I think it's always nice to not let a former player show out against your team when they come back to Arrowhead, and I guess we were in Miami, but come back and do there. So, I saw an interesting stat, and I'm just thinking about this right now. I know I'm transitioning away from the defense, but I have to find this. It's about Patrick Mahomes. Give me just 1 second here. So obviously we know he, had a rough game last year. Not rough game, but, had some turnovers in the Super Bowl last year, which was played in Miami. And let me see. Patrick Mahomes. Oh, this is bad radio, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, you got to have that pulled up and ready to go.
Who is this guy?
Man.
Dead air, a podcast. Terrible.
I know.
I will say, while we're waiting, you can find that stat. Shout out to McCole Hardman and his 67-yard, or I think it was 67-yard punt return for a touchdown.
Oh, yeah.
Always great to see special teams get into it. And a guy like McCole Hardman who, he's not he's about as fast as Tyreek Hill is, maybe a little bit slower than Tyreek, but he doesn't
faster than Tyreek.
He doesn't get nearly the amount of recognition that Tyreek Hill does.
No.
And I think if he was on another team with his speed, he might be featured a little bit more. But that's got to be tough when you're behind a guy like Tyreek and you're like the third or fourth wide receiver, but he gets a chance to shine on special teams, has that punt return for a touchdown. That was pretty awesome.
Okay, so I'm giving up on the stat, but
Okay.
but it was
all of that anticipation for nothing.
I know.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure the stat was, though, in Patrick Mahomes' career at Arrowhead, he has 5 interceptions, and at Miami or Hard Rock Stadium, whatever it's called, he has 6. But just blowing me away that he only had 5 interceptions at Arrowhead Stadium. If that's the stat.
Yeah, that's a great stat. Thank you for contributing.
Overwhelmingly underqualified. Hey, you said it up front, Tommy.
That was a prime example of overpromising and under-delivering. The most important thing, though, for Kansas City after that win against the Dolphins is that, number one, they clinched the AFC West, their 5th in a row, which is just a testament to the entire culture for the Chiefs. The fact that they were able to not only clinch, but clinch without very much drama at all, clinch with 3 games left to go in the regular season, and they're AFC West champs again. And then they also were able to move into the number 1 spot, the number 1 seed in the AFC for the playoffs, which is just huge considering that with the expanded playoffs, everybody knows it by now. Only the top seed getting a bye in that first week. They were able to overtake the Steelers, who fell to the Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football, which, Weston, you and I talked last week about how, at least I think I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see Pittsburgh lose again. Yeah. That was after they lost to Washington on Monday Night Football. They fell to the Bills. So back-to-back losses for the Steelers, and now the Chiefs, just like that, leapfrogged them and now are the number 1 seed in the AFC. They control their own destiny, which is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now they do have a tough, as maybe this perfect segue into this week's game, coming up against New Orleans, which will definitely be, at least in my opinion, and I would assume everybody would agree, the toughest game left on their regular season schedule. They are getting the Saints without Drew Brees, who has multitude of issues going on right now, fractured ribs and a couple other things. But Taysom Hill, who has taken over, is playing pretty good football. He's not Drew Brees, definitely brings an entire different skill set than what Drew Brees does, moves around, runs really well. He was kind of their really all gadget player prior to taking over at quarterback for Drew Brees. He played special teams. He played tight end. He lined up at wide receiver. They'd throw him in the backfield. He really did everything for that football team and was still listed as a quarterback on the roster. And then when Drew Brees got hurt, they moved him into the starting role, even though they have Jameis Winston on the roster. So it'll definitely be interesting. It'll be a test for that defensive line and that pass rush to get to a very mobile Taysom Hill and really see what this team can do against what many consider to be maybe the second best team in football.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you brought up Drew Brees and the injuries that, he suffered. He's got, several fractured ribs. He had a punctured lung. Just crazy injuries that Drew Brees had been playing with for a while. And we still don't know for sure whether or not Drew Brees will play. I would say the likelihood is slim to none. However, the Saints did designate him to return to practice this week. Sean Payton said that Drew Brees still has a ways to go in his recovery, but he did tell reporters, this was today, told reporters, we haven't ruled anything just because we don't have to. He's got a ways to go still, and he's someone we're not just going to hurry back and put him in the game. I think the significance of the injuries are such that you've got to make sure he can function and feel confident. That being said, again, it's pretty slim to none that he's not going to play. But that being said, I've been pleasantly surprised by Taysom Hill and the way that he's played. I know he kind of had a rough, at least early go of it last week, but he has kind of proven himself to be, I would say, adequately capable of filling in while Drew Brees is hurt. I think that's going to be kind of the biggest question mark. What are the Chiefs going to be able to show on defense to limit what Taysom Hill can do? And of course, he's got guys like Alvin Kamara. He's got Michael Thomas. I mean, there are some playmakers on that Saints offense.
Well, I think the biggest difference is going to be the kind of game plan that you have to have, because Taysom Hill is a quarterback that can hurt you with his legs. He's averaging 5.5 yards per carry. Drew Brees ain't running for 5.5 yards a carry when he gets back.
Drew Brees ain't running for 5.5 yards in the whole game.
No, he hasn't run for 5.5 yards against his kids in the backyard of his mansion. Okay. So it's going to be much, much different, obviously, with Hill, because Hill can run the football. And, when you got your backup coming in and they go 3-1, I mean, typically, I think the rule is if your back end comes in and they go 500, you're happy. Taysom Hill's come in 3-1 with a 73% completion percentage. Yeah. Can I interest you in that? There are a lot of starting quarterbacks that would be interested in that. So tough week for the defense, I think. But for me, 10-3, the Saints are almost definitely in the playoffs. I do not put Drew Brees in. If I'm New Orleans, I don't do it.
Okay, so we're going to get into prediction time here, and I'm going to do something different. So rather than asking for predictions on the final score of this game, by the time we bring this podcast back, it'll be January. The regular season will be over. We'll be into the playoffs. So my prediction is for both of you guys, and I'll do the same. What will the Chiefs' final record be going into the playoffs, and what will their seed be going into the postseason? So, Blake, I'll start with you. What do you think? Final regular season record and seed in the playoffs.
Wow, that is a tough one. So the Chiefs currently at 12-1, Pittsburgh at 11-2. Honestly, right now I'm almost a little bit more concerned with the Buffalo Bills. If I am the Kansas City Chiefs, Pittsburgh has not looked as good the last couple of weeks. Buffalo, over the last 3 weeks, I think has been probably the best team in football. I am going to guess that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to continue to fall down a little bit. I think that they will slide to end the season. I think that the Chiefs are going to, 15-1 is so good. The Steelers have got the Bengals coming up. The Colts, I think they're going to lose to the Browns. So because of that loss to the Browns, I don't think that the Chiefs are going to lose more than one game the rest of the way. So I'm going to say the Chiefs are going to be, we'll say 14-2, but they're going to have the number one seed.
Weston, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely all in on the prediction of number one seed. I agree. I mean, I think the Steelers are I'll use and I'm going to steal this from Pardon My Take. Everybody knows I'm a big Pardon My Take fan, but I think they're fraudulent. I just don't think they are as good of a team as their record reflects. So I think they're going to lose one, maybe two. I think they lose to the Colts and to the Browns to end the season. Just Kansas City gets the 1 seed. The only way I'm going to differ, because I'm the eternal optimist on this show, I think the Chiefs end the season 15-1. I think they go ahead and squeak one out against New Orleans, and then I don't think that the Falcons or the Chargers are at a place where they just have the talent to beat Kansas City.
Chargers, they didn't early. It was overtime.
I know.
They didn't early in week 2 either. Just saying.
So Weston, you're saying 15-1 and number 1 seed in the playoffs?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to make it a clean sweep and say number 1 seed in the playoffs. I don't see a scenario where they've gotten that and they're going to let that go. I think a lot of that is going to come down to Pittsburgh as well. I agree with you guys. They're not nearly as good of a football team as advertised. But I'm going to actually agree with Blake. I think that the Chiefs will drop one coming in. I don't necessarily think that they're going to drop this game coming up this weekend against New Orleans. But it would not surprise me if the Chiefs drop the final game of the regular season against the Chargers. I know it's a home game, but like Blake said, they did struggle with the Chargers in week number 2. And on top of that, you're talking about, week 17, you're talking about potentially resting some of the players.
Sure.
I know that's the argument every year that, the starters are going to be rested and the team's not going to win. But it wouldn't surprise me if Andy Reid said, all right, we're not going to either play Patrick and Tyreek and Travis and, these guys, or maybe we'll play him for the first half and then pull him. I just think that there's too much of a question mark, and it might not even be that Chargers game. I just think that one of the 3 games coming in, the Chiefs will drop. So I'm going to say 14-2 is their final regular season record, and then they will be the number 1 seed in the playoffs. Any final thoughts on Kansas City?
Yeah, well, actually, that's a good thought, and I don't want to open up a whole nother discussion and topic as we're moving in, but it's interesting this year to potentially rest your starters as you're going to get the number 1 bye and then get another week of rest. The whole rest versus rust thing, that kind of adds another dimension if you're talking about essentially 2 full weeks of rest before playing another game, good, bad, and I don't really know, and I don't want us to open up another can of worms here, but that's very interesting thought, and I agree with you. I could see that scenario playing out.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening as the next 3 weeks roll on. And like I said, we won't be back for a new episode until the regular season is done. We'll revisit these predictions and see where we stand when we get into the postseason. That's our talk on the Kansas City Chiefs on this episode. We promised a ton of content on this holiday extravaganza, and that content is continuing. We already had one great episode on the show with Jason Miles from the Wichita Thunder. Now we're bringing on interview number 2, and it's with a guy that I'm pretty close to. He's my cousin, but on top of that, he's also he's a diehard Wichita Wind Surge fan. He's a freelance writer and has written articles about the Wichita Wind Surge when they were affiliated with the Miami Marlins. And he's here on Keeper of the Games to talk about what's been going on with the new affiliation for the Wind Surge with the Minnesota Twins and moving to AA. So Clint Dick is joining us here on Keeper of the Games. Let's check out that interview right now. All right, Keeper of the Games rolls on now with another guest. We've just been rocking and rolling with the guests today on this new episode of the podcast, and this interview is no exception to that. We're pleased to welcome in Clint Dick to Keeper of the Games. And Clint, I asked you before we came on if I could call you an insider. And you said that might be a little bit of a stretch, but I guess we can call you a diehard fan of the Wichita Wind Surge, someone that follows what's going on with the Wind Surge baseball team. You've written some articles about the Wind Surge prior to the whole COVID situation breaking down. So we're pleased to have you here on the podcast, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I'm really excited about baseball here in Wichita, affiliated baseball. So I guess at the very least, you can call me someone pretty pumped about hopefully some 2021 baseball.
Yeah, it was definitely a bummer, to say the least, that there was no baseball here in Wichita in 2020. The inaugural year of the Wichita Wind Surge didn't happen as planned. The brand new stadium, Riverfront Stadium, sat empty for the entire season due to COVID-19. But that wasn't the only news that involved the Wichita Wind Surge. As just recently, within the last week, we learned that the Wichita Wind Surge, they've been invited to become the AA affiliate of the Minnesota Twins. Prior to that, the Wichita Wind Surge, they were the AAA affiliate of the Miami Marlins. Now, Clint, I know that when that was all announced, and going all the way back to when the Wind Surge first formed, and we found out that they were going to be the AAA affiliate of the Miami Marlins. I know that you studied the farm system for Miami and who some of those players would be coming into the Wind Surge. And Weston and I talked about a few of them. I think of guys like Sixto Sanchez and Jazz Chisholm, who are slated to play at least for a little while in Wichita. I'm guessing that there are some players that come to mind for you that you were thinking, man, it would have been great to watch them play in Wichita last year.
Well, yeah, a lot of the guys that you had mentioned, and Miami has done a really great job of kind of rebuilding their entire roster, from their major league roster all the way through the minor leagues. And a lot of people were kind of surprised when they made a playoff push in this shortened season. And I, as somebody who kind of did do a little bit of writing for their SB Nation site and followed their minor league system, I was over here kind of like, I feel like people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit. But the switch to Minnesota, I think is still pretty interesting, because Minnesota is another team that really has done a pretty good job in the past several years building up their minor league system. So there's quite a few pretty interesting players and pretty good players that I think are going to be coming through Wichita. You guys got you got names like Royce Lewis, who's a top 10 prospect. His highest level has been AA, and we may see him start out there this year. So, regardless of what team it is, you're going to have guys, potentially top 100 guys coming through the minor leagues, especially whether it's AAA or AA. So that's still pretty exciting for Wichita.
Clint, when the announcement came down about a week ago that the Wind Surge would be changing affiliations from the Miami Marlins to the Minnesota Twins, and then moving from AAA to AA, I don't know if you followed any of the comment sections on any of the, like the Wichita Eagle or any of the news sites. And Weston and I talked about this on last week's episode. There was quite a bit of backlash, and there was quite a bit of people that were really upset and really angry, feeling like that there might have been a bait and switch that had been placed upon them, that Wichita was promised a AAA baseball team, and without even playing a game, now Wichita's getting a AA baseball team, and in their minds it's a step down. Were you surprised by number one, did you see any of it? Number two, were you surprised by just some of the reactions that you saw from people around the community?
I don't know if surprised is the right word, but I did see some of that. I may or may not have left a comment myself. Not anything nasty, but trying to keep up some excitement, locally, for the team, because it really is based on what has happened in minor league baseball the last year and especially the last few months, where a lot of these communities, for those who don't know, minor league baseball was really taken over and is now sort of managed by Major League Baseball. And a lot of communities lost their team and lost their team affiliation due to Major League Baseball restructuring the whole minor league system. They broke it down from 160 total minor league teams to now 120. So, and there's a lot of communities, maybe even the size of Wichita, who really lost sort of that identity. So, I think it's kind of important to remember how well off we are that we have this minor league affiliation, which is really important. but I can understand the backlash just a little bit, because when you think about it, AAA, AA, AAA is obviously the higher up, the closer to the big leagues. So it does feel, I can understand that sense of pride, sort of a prideful thing where, it does feel like a little bit of a slap. But when you understand how the minor league system works, that's where I get kind of on the defensive, because the product on the field between AAA and AA is really not that much different. And in some cases, I think you could make the argument that AA actually might have the better quote unquote talent from the players, due to the fact that AAA is a lot of times comprised of sort of a taxi squad of pro players on the 40-man roster, who sort of get shuffled back and forth between the big leagues and the minor leagues. Sometimes they stash career minor leaguers, so to speak, players who maybe aren't quite good enough to have a full-time job at the major league level, but play out their careers in the minor leagues. Whereas AA, a lot of times, is where you see the guys with the highest ceilings, these top 100 prospects, who this is sort of their last stop right before they get called up to the big leagues. So yeah, from the outside looking in, or maybe somebody who doesn't really follow baseball, quite as obsessively as some of us do. Some of us who play like fantasy baseball and things like that, like I do. I can understand why there might be a little bit of a backlash, but at the same time, I think it is important to remember that talent-wise, the product on the field, that's still going to be the same thing.
Well, hey, Clint, I definitely agree with you. And that was kind of the opinion that I had last week on the podcast, and Weston and I were kind of talking about that. And Blake, I'd love to get your thoughts too. I mean, we didn't have you on last week, and I'd love to get your opinions on where your head is now, knowing that the Wind Surge will be moving from AAA to AA.
My opinion is the same as Clinton's, and AA baseball is still going to be high quality baseball. It's not like the facilities are going to be any different. It'll be a little weird, I think, because of the fact that they're now going to be a Twins affiliate. There are a lot of Royals fans down here in Wichita, so I don't know what kind of a dynamic that's going to be, trying to cheer for a team that's then feeding players into your division rival. So that'll be a little bit weird. Clinton, as this restructuring went along, there was a time when Wichita, kind of knew that there was a good chance that they would not be a AAA team anymore, but did not necessarily know what franchise was going to pick them up. Were there any other franchises that were close to, or that almost picked up Wichita, or was it always going to be the Twins?
That's a good question, and one, unfortunately, I don't know too much behind that. I did reach out recently to Jared Forma, the GM of the Wind Surge, just to see what's going on, and he was nice enough to write me a message back, and he basically said that there wasn't a whole lot he could talk about right now, just because they're still finalizing the deal with the Twins. Which, by the way, another interesting tidbit I found in my research. This will be if it goes through, my understanding will be a 10-year player development contract or license between the Twins and the Wind Surge, which is a lot longer than normally. Usually it's about I believe like a 2-year contract, which is why you see a lot of these minor league affiliates sort of switch affiliations on and off quite a bit. But this could potentially be sort of a lot longer standing one. I'm not sure if there were any other teams who may have reached out to the Wind Surge. I assume, considering as much shuffling with teams, especially between both levels of play and divisions and all that, I assume there probably could have been. But you're right in a lot of things. It does bring sort of an interesting dynamic between the fact that the Royals and the Twins are, longstanding division rivals. I think that's sort of a double-edged sword, I guess you could say, because it's like, well, I don't really want, I'm a Royals fan. I don't really want to root for the Twins, but at the same time, this also kind of gives me a better chance to see a lot of the players who go through Wichita actually make it to the big leagues, because around here we get a lot of Royals games on television, and they play the Twins so much, you'll see those guys play, whereas Miami's in the National League, and it's a lot further away as far as geographical distance. So like I said, sort of a double-edged sword there. But yeah, that's a good question. I'd be interested to know that as well.
Clint, my understanding is we switched from the Pacific Coast League to the Texas League. Is that right? And what if anything, do you know about the Texas League and what we should expect from this switch?
Sure. The Texas League, from my understanding, is there's two divisions in the Texas League. Wichita will be a part of the North Division, which is comprised of a lot of regional teams. You've got teams like the team that formerly was the Wranglers out of Springdale, Arkansas. There's one in Springfield, Missouri. I have to think here. Tulsa and Little Rock are the other teams, and then the South Division of the Texas League is comprised of all Texas teams, teams like Amarillo and I believe Midland maybe. So that's kind of interesting. Again, it is a little bit more regionally based than the Pacific Coast League. The Pacific Coast League did have some more regional teams like Oklahoma City, but it's a little bit more spread out. So it'll be kind of interesting to see the dynamic in the Texas League, especially considering the former Wranglers team, now the Northwest Arkansas Naturals, will be a direct division rival, and also the Kansas City AA affiliate.
Yeah, and I do feel like that's maybe partially where some of that backlash comes from, is the fact that I think people are thinking, well, this is exactly where Wichita was 13 years ago when the Wranglers left Wichita. They were in the Texas League. They were playing teams like the Arkansas Travelers and the Springfield Cardinals and the Tulsa Drillers. And now these are the same teams that the Wind Surge will play in Wichita, coming up this season. But at the end of the day, my opinion was is the same as everybody else's, as far as the product on the field is going to be much the same, if not better, in Double League than it would have been in AAA. In Double A instead of AAA. But then also, I think a majority of those people that were commenting, that were mad about it, were probably never going to go to a game anyway, and they were probably keyboard warriors, and they were just gonna leave their comment and be negative about it. At the end of the day,
Sure.
I do think it's going to be good baseball back in Wichita. The one other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, Clint, is that obviously it's been a rough year for the Wind Surge. A lot of anticipation starting the season, or getting ready to start the season before it was called off. You've got a brand new stadium that's sitting downtown that has not been used, a team that has not taken the field yet. And then even worse, you have team founder and owner Lou Schweckheimer passing away due to COVID-19 just a few months ago. So there definitely have been a lot of challenges to overcome for the Wind Surge franchise prior to even taking the field. What do you think? What's your sense of where the Wind Surge is mentally, emotionally, as a franchise moving forward? What do you think that fans will see from this team when they're finally able to hit the field?
I actually want to parlay off of that question before you answer it, Clinton, because you mentioned this, Tommy. There was momentum for the Wind Surge here in Wichita. There was, you see the hat that Clinton is wearing up there. They had a merchandise store. There were people who were excited. Let's get behind this team. Let's get out to the ballpark. The name of the stadium, by the way, is terrible. Terrible. If the Reds play at Riverfront Stadium, sorry, that's the way it is. I don't care if I'm old or whatever. Riverfront is in Cincinnati. So to parlay on what Tommy said, where is the franchise? What I also want you to answer, as you answer his question, is how do they build that back? How do they get people geeked up for baseball and geeked up about the surge again.
Right. Well, and to kind of go back just a little bit, the name of the stadium, definitely what it is, Blake. But I also feel like a lot of those people commenting on the recent stories were probably less mad about the AA, AAA switch and still more salty over the name that it again is what it is, but but it's still it's still really amazing to have affiliated baseball back in Wichita, because you look at a lot of these other markets that are pretty close to Wichita's size, whether a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger, like Omaha and Tulsa and things like that, and they've had affiliated baseball, and Wichita's been without it for so many years. It really is amazing to get it back, because it's the type of thing that you just sort of expect a community like this to have. And one final note before I answer your question is, I don't know whether you guys have been to the new stadium physically yet or not. I had the chance to go see it right before COVID hit in March, and I was actually given a tour by Lou Schwechheimer, and he was that was the only time I ever met him, and he was a really, really nice guy. You could tell he was very energized about the entire process, moving from New Orleans to Wichita. And that stadium is really beautiful. I haven't had a chance to go back since they put the team store up there and everything, but it's definitely worth going just to see the new stadium. But to kind of answer your question, that's sort of the question that really has to be answered by the front office people. How do they market and get people excited about baseball despite everything that's happened? And, it really does help having that $75-80 million stadium that is really state of the art. I know people always had some maybe mixed opinions on Lawrence Dumont. It was very historical, but to take money and invest it back into the community and build something new that is really a state of the art facility for baseball, I think that's a huge boon. Again, I think that they've got to work on ensuring the community that the product on the field, the AA product, is still going to be amazing baseball, which it is. You're going to see plenty of major leaguers come through here, really, I guess my own opinion is to continue to really develop that area in downtown. I know downtown Wichita has seen a lot of changes and a lot of improvements just over the last decade, and that's really amazing to see as we sort of reinvest in the community and in the downtown community. So my hopes is that they really market that and they really push that, and hopefully we can get through COVID and we can get the fans the seats filled in the stadium. I'm really excited about that.
I don't know that I have a question, but I want to piggyback off that thought, because I've said on this podcast before too. I think with the majority of the people that are showing up to this stadium, it's not as much about the baseball as it is about the experience, right? So I really like that you mentioned, how does the wind surge really gain more momentum, and for those in the city that are disappointed that I think we have AA, or that we've had a stadium that's sit empty for a year. Well, the continued development of that area in and of itself is going to generate more excitement when it's a thing to do in a summer night in Wichita, right? Is to take your family to Riverfront Stadium, Blake, and go catch a ball game, and then take the trolley or whatever system they have down to Old Town or whatever, whether that's with your family or then for the younger folks to grab a couple beers and then go down to whatever bars popular these days. Back in my day it was Heroes and rest in peace Doc Howard's, but that's
wow.
I do think that is a really big part of this. And frankly, and I guess I'm looking for a comment because I don't really have a question, but and I just don't know that the average fan, and you mentioned like you yourself as a guy who plays fantasy baseball, you've written for the fan site, someone who's more along the average fan line even has an eye for a difference in talent when the AA talent is maybe less than what's AAA, which we've talked about isn't even going to be the case. So, I'm with you on that, and I think you really were spot on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Weston, and that's really something too that I think earlier this week, the both Jared Forma, the GM for the Wind Surge, as well as Mayor Brandon Whipple came out and made some comments right after the announcement, and that was really their message too. Was regardless of this, it's still the same stadium. We're still here for the same fans, and it is about the experience. You're absolutely right. And speaking of transportation, I read somewhere just, I think yesterday, they were planning on building some sort of transportation facility right there on the corner of that stadium area. So just, it keeps on rolling.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, I'm a partial season ticket holder. Proud of it.
Yeah.
Got them well before the season was canceled, obviously, and I plan on renewing them for this year. And the change between AAA and AA doesn't affect me one bit, or doesn't affect my decision to renew one bit. I'm excited for affiliated baseball back in Wichita. I loved the Wranglers. I loved the level of play that the Wranglers had. I loved the affiliation. I loved knowing that, I could watch guys like Carlos Beltran and Johnny Damon and Zach Greinke and, some of those guys come through Wichita, and I knew that they'd be stars at the major league level. And so getting an opportunity to have that, I know it's with the division rival of the Royals, is still really exciting to me as a fan. But then also, I went to several Wichita Wingnuts games, and it was fine. It was fine to watch baseball in Wichita. The stadium, it was what it was. But just something about having that affiliation, whether it's AAA or AA, is so important to be linked up to the major league level. And so just, my comment as, a partial season ticket holder is that I think it's still a good thing for Wichita. And I'm super excited for the 2021 season. And Clint, I'm sure that you are too. Last but not least, I know that you did some freelance writing for the Wind Surge when they were affiliated with the Marlins. I'm guessing or assuming that will hopefully be something you can continue now that they're going to be affiliated with the Twins.
I'd like to. I'm going to reach out to a few of those fan sites. Like I said, as a former journalist, sometimes you just gotta scratch that itch, the writing itch, every once in a while. So we'll see. Once, even if I don't, I'm still planning on being at games, watching players, and even for the, like you guys said, even for the just avid baseball fan, something to do in Wichita. It's going to be great.
Sounds good. Well, we appreciate you being on the podcast, and maybe when we get into the season, we can have you back on. We can talk a little bit about what the team is looking like and how the season is going.
Sounds great. Thank you to all you guys.
Thanks, Clint. Have a good one. All right, a big thanks to Clint Dick joining us here on Keeper of the Games to talk about the Wichita Wind Surge and their move to AA and their affiliation with the Minnesota Twins. We're going to get into our College Hoops Roundup here on Keeper of the Games. We're going to talk all about the D1 schools around the state, Wichita State, Kansas State, and of course, the University of Kansas. Let's start with Wichita State men's basketball. And Weston, it's been a topic of conversation the last couple of weeks on the program. In fact, all the way back when we had Aaliyah Funshell on the program back in, I think it was November when we had her on before the season started, about what to expect from Isaac Brown's crew. And of course, the Shockers have been shorthanded as far as their players have been concerned. The first couple of games, we really didn't exactly know what we would see out of the Shockers. I think we have a little bit of a better idea now. From the last time we had an episode to now, the Shockers are 1-1 and very closely, very nearly were 2-0. They lost at the buzzer to a very talented Oklahoma State Cowboys squad and Cade Cunningham, who had the last second shot to win the game for Oklahoma State last weekend. And then they opened up American Conference play with a 69-65 win on the road against rival Tulsa. So knowing that, from last week to this week, have your opinions changed at all about the Wichita State Shockers?
No, not at all. I think one thing maybe is coming into shape. I don't know that my opinion has changed, but I think it is maybe forming a little bit more. We kind of talked about, you and I joked about how neither we were very much open about, we didn't know anything about Mizzou that Wichita State was playing. And then afterwards we're like, well, they lost to maybe what's looking like a good Missouri team. They've turned out to be a very good basketball team. Oklahoma State's a very good basketball team. Two teams that Wichita State played very close with. So I think those, to find a little bit of glimmer in some losses, I think those were still good losses for a young and still gelling Wichita State team, a team that hasn't been full strength. So to have that opportunity to really see that, boy, these guys, they can play with some of the top talent is very promising.
Blake, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the Tulsa game or follow much of what was going on. What are your thoughts on the Shocker squad?
Well, what I was going to say is, this Shocker team, you have to be pretty impressed with how tough they've been playing teams, especially the fact that they're not shooting the three all that well. I really liked Ricky Council the fourth, 13 points, 8 rebounds in that Wichita State win. Some really nice offensive rebounds against Tulsa that led to second chance points, but Wichita State shooting poorly from the outside. They're getting out rebounded by 3 a game. But the thing that I like so far is only averaging 10 turnovers a game with a new head coach, even though he's been in the program for forever. And I certainly don't think that Coach Brown has changed, the offensive systems or anything. But the fact that these guys have come together after having some coronavirus issues, having that event canceled up there, that would have cost them practice time. To see them valuing the basketball this early, I think is a very, very positive thing so far.
Going back to the Oklahoma State game over the weekend, I mentioned Cade Cunningham having the last second shot to win the game for the Cowboys. And he truly is an impressive player. I mean, there's a reason why he was the number 1 recruit coming out of high school. And, just pretty crazy that Mike Boynton's crew was able to snag him to go down to Stillwater. But that being said, yeah, he had the game-winning shot, but he didn't particularly shoot the ball all that well against the Shockers. He had 10 points. He did get into double digits, and he had 6 rebounds, but it wasn't the dominant performance that I think that a lot of people are used to seeing Cade Cunningham have. I think that might be a little bit of a testament to the defense that the Shockers have in place. And then in that game, I know that the Shockers, lost that game in a nail biter, but there were some big performances. Tyson Etienne had 19 points. Alterique Gilbert, he kind of seems to be a consistent. We talk about him nearly every week. In every box score, he's scoring in double digits. He added 14 points and 4 rebounds. Maurice Udezi had 10 points. So definitely some big contributors in that game. And then looking at, the game against Tulsa, Blake, you mentioned what Ricky Council the fourth did, kind of a breakout game for him for Wichita State. Good to see Trey Wade in double figures against Tulsa as well with 11 points. And then there's Alterique Gilbert again, scoring 13 points for the Shocker crew. It definitely seems to be maybe Tyson Etienne's team. Like, I think as far as, kind of being the offensive leader, for most games, but it's really nice to see a consistent play out of the veteran, the grad transfer, Alterique Gilbert. That's definitely a big get. I know, Greg Marshall recruited him to come to Wichita as a grad transfer from UConn, but definitely great to see him be kind of a constant for the Shockers there offensively.
I think a little bit disappointing for Dexter Dennis.
Yeah.
Only 6 points per game this year, only 8 rebounds a game. And beg your pardon, 8 points per game is his average historically. And the fact that he comes out and only gets 2 rebounds the last 2 games combined, that's not good. They need to get a lot more out of Dexter Dennis in the front court in terms of rebounding. And I've been surprised by his shooting. He's been the shooter, I think, that has underperformed the most, shooting 7% worse from the 3 and way worse from the 2, 13%. He's only shooting 27% less, 27% on the year. So Dexter Dennis, if he starts performing the way that we thought that he could, then all of a sudden, I think Wichita State is in a really good spot, probably 4-0 if Dexter Dennis plays to his capabilities.
And that's a good point too, with where this team is at. And I think they're kind of going through a little bit in the beginning, some of the same stuff that Kansas is, right? Is of trying to figure out who they are, who's their guy. I mean, yeah, it's kind of been Tyson, Etienne, but really from there, you've seen a different array of kind of, I don't know, breakout or second wing performances. And the one thing that I really like what Wichita State's doing, or what they have going for them, is while you're kind of in this mode of having different guys step up and play, the one constant is your point guard and Alterique Gilbert, and I think that's so important for teams. When you can get that consistent play out of your point guard, that's gonna consistently help the offense as a whole. And I think it almost makes it less important for an offense to kind of have a guy when your point guard is the guy to really at least lead from a consistency standpoint. So I think if you're a Shockers fan, you have to be very encouraged, very, very encouraged with the start of this season so far.
This is going to be a team. I feel comfortable saying this right now, and this might be a hot take, although I am the one that has the hot take horn, so you guys can't buzz me on this. But I can yell. Well, that's true. I'm fully comfortable in saying that there's enough talent on this team that we could be talking about an NCAA tournament bid. And that was not something that I think I wasn't comfortable saying as recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago, with all the turnover, all the turmoil, everything going on with the program. I've been really impressed with the way the Shockers have responded through adversity, through the coaching change, through a COVID outbreak, through playing the first 2 games of the season with 8 guys total that they could play, and then getting in and really playing Oklahoma State close and tight. They could have won that game. And then going on the road in your American Conference opener and beating Tulsa on the road. These American Conference teams, they've had the opportunity in a lot of cases to play a handful more games than the Shockers have this season. The Shockers, going into that Tulsa game, they only played 3 games, and they go on the road in a hostile environment for their opener and they win. That gives me a lot of optimism for what this Shocker squad could be. If they're able to do that in December, think of what they could potentially do in February and then ultimately in March. I feel really optimistic about where this team is. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
I think the further they get from that preseason extracurricular stuff, the less it will matter. These guys come back, they're going to be focused on basketball. They don't have any class right now. I don't know if they're going to be going home for Christmas. That's a whole nother coronavirus related issue that doesn't really pertain to sports necessarily, but these guys are insulated right now. They're going to probably have an extra week coming back in January where they won't be going to class, so they can really focus on really trying to get better over this next month. So you focus on that. If you have some success, I don't think that, the playing with 8 players, Greg Marshall, you keep winning and playing like this, I think that'll become an afterthought very quickly.
And you never know. Isaac Brown could very well be coaching his way into the permanent position. And
sure.
And I don't know if that's the ultimate goal of what the administration is looking to do potentially, if this is kind of an audition or a tryout for him. But with the way that he has rallied this crew and having a veteran head coach on his bench like Billy Kennedy certainly helps for sure. I've been really impressed with the way he's carried himself and with the team as far as rallying behind him. And it's what, a lot of the former players were saying on social media, that, the best choice would be Isaac Brown because the players already loved him. And you can definitely tell they're playing for him and he's 100% got their support. So I don't know if you guys have much more to add on with the Shockers, but I definitely am optimistic about their chances later in the season.
The only thing I will add, while I started this conversation by saying, look, I think you have to be encouraged even from these 2 losses. The one thing that does concern me about losing to Missouri and losing to Oklahoma State is the Shockers didn't really have a non-con schedule. So, who knows what this evaluation is going to look like when we get to March in trying to pick teams to make but if they don't win, the American, they're going to have to hope that the strength through the American helps them build out, a roster or a resume, or that the committee is kind of doing some different things to really evaluate teams this year, because they're not going to really have a non-con win to hang their hats on and say, hey, this is what we did, and look who else we can beat outside of our own conference.
Yeah, you really gotta hope that the American Conference is strong this year, and I
Yeah.
think that there will be some teams. I mean, Houston comes to mind. As I believe they're top 10 right now nationally. They've been a powerhouse the last few years. I mean, there are some teams that traditionally carry that conference, so I think that'll help quite a bit. They do play another non-conference game the 2nd of January, and they're on the road taking on Mississippi. And then they're in American play the Tuesday before Christmas and then the Wednesday after Christmas. But before they get back into American play, they do have one more game this Friday night. And Blake, you are kind of the expert in all things D2 basketball. They're taking on the Emporia State Hornets. What do you know about Emporia State as they'll come to town to take on the Shockers this coming Friday?
Well, Emporia State is coming off of a coronavirus-related schedule adjustment. Let's just put it that way. They have not played for a while. They are doing very well, 3-0 on the season, and their wins have come against Nebraska Kearney, Fort Hays State, Northeastern State. They are receiving points in the latest Division II. I believe it's the coaches poll that they're getting ranked in. Let's not be, how do I say this nicely? They have not exactly played the world beaters in the MIAA, but to be frank. They have played all 3 games on the road, though. So, I like Coach Doty. I like what he's doing there. I certainly think that it's going to be a tough matchup for Newman as they go to Emporia. That was one of the games that got postponed. The Jets will actually be making that one up on January 2nd up at White Auditorium for a 4 p.m. tip-off. But this is a team that has played really well defensively. Their opponents are shooting less than 25% from the three-point line. They're out-rebounding their opponents by 6 boards a game. They have struggled from the outside as well, but this is a team that's going to win with defense. They're going to play good defense, but as I mentioned, they haven't exactly played the best offenses in the MIAA. So I'm a little bit leery of jumping aboard the Hornets are a top 25 team. I think we should, maybe pause on that for just a second.
The Shockers are 2-2 overall on the season, as we mentioned. And with that win against Tulsa on the road, they are 1-0 in the American Conference, along with SMU and South Florida, who also are 1-0. Speaking of South Florida, that is the next American game that the Shockers have this coming Tuesday. And they're on the road taking on USF. And then they're back at home against East Carolina on the 30th of December. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening with the Shockers over the next couple of weeks. And of course, we'll have another update for you when we have our next episode in the new year. Let's shift gears and talk some Kansas State Wildcats basketball. Now, Weston, the last time that you and I recorded a podcast was 1 week ago, and we were literally in the middle of recording the podcast as the Wildcats were playing Fort Hays State, and we were giving like live in-game scoring updates. We stopped the podcast prior to the final score, but now we know that Fort Hays State shocked the world and became the first Division II team to beat a Division I team in basketball in 20 years. I believe the last time it happened was back in the year 2000, and Texas Tech lost. And now
Texas A&M Corpus Christi.
Yeah, that was back in the year 2000. And so definitely a monumental night for Fort Hays State University. We know that that was probably the most embarrassing loss of the Bruce Weber era and maybe ever for Wildcat basketball. Since that time, the Wildcats, I guess you could say, rebounded. They beat Milwaukee by 1 point last Friday, but then they did have a pretty good showing about 24 hours ago in their Big 12 opener on the road in Ames, Iowa, as they took down the Cyclones of Iowa State 74-65. So, Weston, I'll start with you. My question is, what the hell is going on with Kansas State basketball?
Whew, boy, if I had the answers, I'm sure I might be getting a call from Manhattan. But I'll tell you, I'm going to go ahead and make a general rule right now. As a head coach, if you lose to a Division II opponent, you are immediately put on the hot seat. I mean, I think I kind of defended Bruce Weber, said, "Hey, what K-State? What do you want to do?" You were very quick to say, "Hey, I've never been a Bruce Weber fan. Don't necessarily love him there." I'm ready. I mean, I'm not saying fire the guy, but you immediately go on a hot seat as a head coach when you lose to a Division II opponent. Now, I don't know, on some wild planet of Bill Self, I mean, there's always exceptions, right? If Bill Self were to lose a D2 opponent, I mean, I don't know, maybe you could make some exceptions, but old Bruce Weber, the rest of this season will be watched under a very, very intense eye. But going back to, I don't want to echo what I said last podcast, but it really is true. You've got a lot of young guys that are playing right now. And I think you're going to get this insane inconsistency when you're playing so many young guys. I mean, they had a great performance. I was reading an article about Davion Bradford, who's kind of the big man for K-State in their 4-out, 1-in look. Against Iowa State, he caught 3 lobs, had 18 points. And they kind of were comparing him in loosely. I think the K-State players were very much, or it was one particular K-State player that they interviewed, and I missed his name. Was comparing to what they were doing with him to what Kansas did with Azubuike in the past, just being such a big presence, they just can lob it up to him, and him score, and he's a freshman. So, and I've talked about some of the other freshmen that they've had a really, some really good looks from out of in the beginning of the year. So I think you just got to buckle in, K-State fans, and know you're playing some young guys that hopefully you're excited about. But with that, you're going to get a wild amount of inconsistency where you look good at times and you look like absolutely hot garbage like you did against Fort Hays State. And that's just what the Wildcats are going to have to deal with the rest of the season, in my opinion.
In that Fort Hays State game, the Wildcats shot 44% from the field, 19% from beyond the arc. And they only made 20 out of 30 free throws in that game against a Fort Hays State team that really kind of had the deck stacked against them. Again, Blake, you know more about Division II basketball than we do. Number one, I want to know more about Fort Hays State and what happened. And number two, I'd love to know about what your reaction was when you saw that Fort Hays State took down Kansas State.
Well, first of all, Newman actually just played Fort Hays State, so I was actually knee deep in this as part of my preparation for getting ready to do the games on Saturday. And I actually still have my board up. That's actually last year's board that I pulled up there, not this year's board. I talked to Gerard Welbrock about this, and he kind of had the same opinion that I did. These Division II games don't mean a whole lot. It's hard to extrapolate a whole lot. But he did tell me that, Fort Hays State didn't have their whole rotation. They didn't have their whole rotation when they played Newman. Naiji Wright has not played a game this year for Fort Hays State. He was their number 2 scorer last year. They've been relying on a lot of new guys. They think that a freshman from Seattle who played at Cooper International Academy, Elijah Nanabu, would probably be starting. Hasn't played as second this year because of NCAA transfer litigation, let's say. They're trying to appeal to get him eligible. Hasn't happened yet. Jared Vidstam is a player. He was averaging 22 and 11 when they played Newman. Newman lost to Fort Hays State by 6 in overtime. If you're a Kansas State fan, you got to be concerned. You have got to be concerned that you can't beat a winless. Fort Hays State was winless. Now, all their losses were close, but once again, and I mean, I include Newman. Now, Washburn's a good team. Washburn's a real good MIAA team. Only lost to them by 2. They lost to Emporia State by 2. They lost to Nebraska Kearney by 4. So they've been right in every single game, but they're not exactly the elite of the MIAA.
They were without their coach, right?
Yeah, their coach was out due to coronavirus. He did not coach against Newman when they came to Wichita. Mark Johnson, he was out with coronavirus protocol. Apparently he's fine, but the assistant coach was the guy who was coaching. And let's not give them too much credit for beating Iowa State either. Iowa State's only win is against, I believe, Arkansas Pine Bluff, and they lost to South Dakota State and got blowed out in the Cyhawk rivalry by Iowa. And Iowa supposedly is good this year, but they got annihilated. And Iowa State is 338th in the country in near the basket percentage defense. They let teams get inside and that means you're letting the team make a lot of layups. So, this is not something where I'd say, oh, well, they beat Iowa State by 9. Who cares? Iowa State's not good this year. Hilton Magic is evacuated. There's no Hilton danger this year because of the fans not being allowed to be in and make that arena what it is. So, honestly, for Kansas State, there's a lot to be concerned about right now. And I don't put any stock into the Iowa State win to say, oh, well, they've obviously figured it out. Now they should come out with their best effort after losing to a Division II team. If you don't come out with your best effort, what are you thinking? What are you doing? The Kansas State players, to their credit, they seemed embarrassed after the Fort Hays State game. They talked about it on video and in the post-game interviews about how they were embarrassed, about how that should not happen, how it can't happen. And so they came out and responded the way they should. You should expect them to do that. I still think Kansas State's in a world of hurt. I still don't think they're going to finish with a winning record in the Big 12. And I certainly didn't see anything in the Iowa State results that would lead me to indicate that all of a sudden they're going to turn it around.
I do have to say, going back to Fort Hays State, and this is my final point on the Tigers, they probably have the best lineup of names that I've ever heard, from Bjarni Johnson and
that is Bjarni Johnson.
Fair enough. Caleb Hammocky, that's a great name.
Yep.
I love Quentin Rock. That's awesome. But my flat out favorite is Hagen Hildendorf.
Hagen
Hildendorf
from Hastings, Nebraska. Actually, he played really. I believe. God, am I thinking back right? I believe he may have had one of those guys had a career high. No, it was Hammocky. Hammocky a good player, and he's from right down in our neck of the woods. He played for the Celtics up at Hutchinson Trinity. He went for like 15 or 18 against Newman. He had a really good game.
Going back to the Wildcats, though, as far as not putting a lot of stock into the victory against Iowa State, I get that. But at the same time, you look at the standings, Kansas State is in first place in the Big 12. I know you have to take that with a lot of grains of salt because it's 1-0. But right now they are number 1. They're in first place in the Big 12 with a 1-0 record tied with OU. But at the same time, Weston, you came out and said you lose to a Division II school like that, you should immediately be put on the hot seat. I think you ought to be immediately fired. And I've been calling for Bruce Weber's removal at Kansas State for several years now. I've never seen a more polarizing coach, someone that just has never had the support of the fan base. And some of that is undeserved, but some of that is deserved. And I thought that his explanations after the game left a lot to be desired. I do think he took some credit. I do think he said that he was embarrassed and it was a stain on the legacy of Kansas State basketball, but you really didn't hear much about it after that. And I'm sure that there were a lot of internal discussions. A lot of conversations have probably been had. I'm sure that there might even be ultimatums going on right now about, you've got to get this turned around. You've got to figure this out. But at the end of the day, it's hard to come back from something like that. And it's hard for me to not think that we are watching the beginning of the end, the true beginning of the end for the Bruce Weber era at Kansas State. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of where I land right now. I think it's nearly impossible for him to come back from that. He could lead this team to a Big 12 championship and a run into the tournament, but people are going to say, didn't you lose to the D2 school? And I think that is far more detrimental to Bruce Weber and his legacy than anything else he could do this season that could turn it around, in my opinion.
So that's a perfect segue into maybe my final question or thought or comment on this topic. How much does Kansas State offer to Greg Marshall this coming off season? Somebody's going to do it. Maybe not. Maybe it needs more than a season to blow over, but somebody's going to do it. You're not telling me that Manhattan wouldn't, scandal notwithstanding, welcome with open arms Greg Marshall at probably whatever amount of money he wanted?
I don't know. I doubt it. I don't think they would. I just don't think. I think you have to give it more time. I think you have to let it sit for a little while longer. I don't think you can literally jump into that right now. Or
I do think it. I do think it
a little bit. Blake, what do you think?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say right now based on everything that's going on, in my opinion.
Well, at the very least, the Wildcats sit at 3-4 overall. Like I mentioned, they are 1-0 in the Big 12. Their next Big 12 game scheduled right now is this coming Saturday. They're at home against the number 2 ranked in the country Baylor Bears. So they go from a pretty poor Iowa State team to a really good Baylor Bears squad. That'll be in Bramlage this coming Saturday. And then they have a couple non-conference games after that. Right around Christmas, they're at home against Jacksonville and then at home against Omaha. We're going to talk about Omaha here in just a second as we transition into talking about the Kansas Jayhawks, who did take on Omaha in non-conference play just about a week ago, and they really had no trouble whatsoever against Omaha as they won that game 95-50 inside Allen Fieldhouse. The next game for the Jayhawks is Thursday night. It's their Big 12 home opener, and it's a battle of 2 top 15 teams as the Jayhawks are on the road in Lubbock, Texas, taking on the Red Raiders of Texas Tech. This is a Jayhawks team that is 6-1 on the season. We've talked about them at length on this podcast the last few weeks about their victories, that they had against Kentucky and then how they beat Creighton, their close loss in their opener against Gonzaga. What's the state of the Jayhawks as they enter Big 12 play? Blake, I'll start with you. How do you assess where the Jayhawks are right now?
I think they're exactly where I thought that they would be. They're 6-1. They've got one really tight loss to a very, very good team. They've played very well at times. Their loss, I think it was the Creighton game. That was the worst I've ever seen a team play in the last 5 minutes and still win the game. That was abysmal, horrible. But for me, you look at what KU is doing offensively and defensively, they are really doing a good job of guarding right now. Opposing teams, they have the 7th best field goal percentage defense in the country. Top 30 point percentage defense. They are giving up a ton of mid-range shots. So they're not letting teams shoot 3-pointers. They're not letting teams shoot point blank. They're 8th in the country in giving up the fewest near to the basket shots. 8th best in the country. So they're forcing teams into the middle of the floor where that's the least efficient shot that you can shoot. You want to be shooting 3s or 2s or wide open mid-range shots. Kansas not giving any of those up. On the other hand, KU offensively has done a great job building up their talent. Bill Self is a fantastic coach. And my thought is, Christian Brown, who is this guy? It looks like he's been on steroids in the offseason. He's scoring 12 points a game, this little scrawny white guy from last year. Who is he? 44% from the field, 44% from the 3. He's averaging 6 rebounds a game. Christian Brown is averaging 6 rebounds a game. It's absolutely insane to me how good Brown is playing. I had no idea that Christian Brown could be this good. Ochai Abaji's playing really well. Really, he's KU's best player for sure. Jalen Wilson, man, what a star he has been, coming out with 15 and 9. I may have to reverse myself on KU's best player for Jalen Wilson, but
clearly been Jalen Wilson. Clearly.
Christian Brown has been the biggest shock for me. 12 and 6. I had no concept that he could be that kind of a player at the Big 12 level.
And, I think that the Jayhawks playing the Mavericks of Omaha, that you have to take that with a grain of salt a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
But I would like to think that we're finally getting to a point now, hopefully, fingers crossed, where David McCormick is starting to settle in a little bit. He had a double-double in that game against Omaha, 11 points and 11 boards. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, Weston, about how David McCormick started the season god awful. He's improved to just awful. But hopefully he's getting to a point now where he can get out of that range and settle that. He started the season awful. I mean, the worst player that KU had for the first 5 games was David McCormick. There's no doubt about it. So hopefully we can get into Big 12 play and see a more relaxed, settled down, and confident David McCormick on the court. And if you've got a guy like David McCormick with his size and ability, and if he can get out of his own head and out of his own way, then you've got a really capable 5 down in the post. And that's really what I know that, Bill Self likes to play through his big. And so if you've got a guy like David McCormick that can settle down, he can be a huge asset for this team.
The other thing we've seen is a very efficient play out of Mitch Lightfoot. I've been very happy to see, his play over the last few games. And I would like to see, I think, a little bit more of use out of both of them. And I don't mean at the same time. I love the 4 out, 1 in. And I mean, if you can use them both, in certain game situations, great. But I more just mean really, and I guess maybe I'm advocating for Mitch playing more, and not because I necessarily think he's better than McCormick, but I think maybe they can be effective in a way where they're both coming in fresh, and consistently kind of throwing a different, because they bring a little bit of a different style when they play that 5-man. Obviously Mitch he's a big guy. I'm sure he's strong. You can tell he's put the time in the weight room over the 5 years he's been at Kansas. But doesn't have that overshadowing size, that we see out of McCormick. So I would like to see them kind of complement each other and share a little bit more time at the 5, but I'm not really hopeful from what we've necessarily seen out of McCormick. I mean, he's supposed to dominate when you play the small schools, and their biggest guy is 6'7". And I haven't looked at the Omaha roster, but that's always consistently the trouble, right? When you play a smaller school, typically they just don't have the size that the D1, the Power 5 schools have. And so I'm not overly, excited about what I've seen necessarily even the last 5 games, but it's always good to see growth as opposed to non-growth, no matter who the opponent is. So there's that, but you find out what this team is in Big 12 play. I mean, that's, a very obvious statement from me, but Big 12 play is going to reveal that. And so I think we'll see very quickly what we have out of this team and Adam McCormick, and what this team can look forward to and have realistic goals for the rest of the year.
I'm pretty sure that in that Omaha game, every player that suited up scored. I'm pretty sure that's the way that it looked. I mean, looking at the stats breakdown from that game, I mean, even guys like Latrell Jostle had 5 points, and Jethro Muscadin had 2 points. Chris Tien made a 3 in his 2 minutes of action at the end of the game. But I was really impressed. You mentioned Mitch Lightfoot, 14 points for him off the bench. And then Tyon Grant Foster had 13 points off the bench as well. And it's been kind of interesting watching early this season how between Tyon Grant Foster and Bryce Thompson, it's almost like those two guys are never both on in a game. It's one or the other. In the games that Grant Foster is scoring double digits, Bryce Thompson is not, and then vice versa. But it's been cool to kind of watch those two guys develop as kind of the most heralded newcomers on this squad. I mean, everybody talks about Ochai, and, we all knew that Jalen Wilson would contribute, maybe not to the level that he has, but we all knew from last season he was going to be able to contribute. But Thompson and Grant Foster were pretty much unknown. We knew Bryce Thompson was a McDonald's All-American, and we knew he was highly recruited. We knew that Tyon Grant Foster was one of the nation's best JUCO players. How are they going to fit into this squad? And I think between the two of them, they fit in pretty nicely. And so I'm optimistic about what those guys can bring to the table, optimistic about just the overall skill level, the talent level that this Jayhawks team has. And Blake, I'm right with you. I think that at 6-1, you have a little bit of a shortened non-conference schedule, but I think the Jayhawks are right where they'd like to be entering Big 12 play. I don't think that Bill Self exactly has what his final rotation is going to be, and you probably shouldn't at this point. But at least you have the pieces of the puzzle. You've got a lot of talented guys. Now it's just a matter of exactly finding out where they're best fit and where, how you're going to rotate them in and out. But again, I think if you're Bill Self, you ought to be pretty thrilled about where this team is standing going into Big 12 play.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that they should feel confident. I think that they should feel like one of the best teams in the country. I think they are one of the best teams in the country. And I think given some more minutes out on the floor, they're going to prove that. And, we'll see what happens. It's not been good money to bet against Bill Self. I know that they picked Baylor this year. Typically, that does not work out for the Big 12 coaches picking against KU to win the title.
It is an absolute juggernaut for the Jayhawks to kick off Big 12 play. Their first 3 games are against top 15 opponents. We mentioned the Thursday night game on the road in Lubbock, taking on Texas Tech, who's ranked 14th in the nation right now. Chris Beard is one of the nation's premier coaches, and it seems like he's always got his squad somewhere in the top 25, and right now they're at number 14. And then the Mountaineers, who are, I feel like, kind of a quiet number 8 in America right now. I mean, Bob Huggins has got his Mountaineer squad playing really good basketball right now. They come to Allen Fieldhouse on Tuesday evening, and then the Jayhawks take a break. They play after the new year on January 2nd, back inside Allen Fieldhouse at home against the Texas Longhorns. And, we could go on and on and on and talk about the difference in home court advantage with no fans or few fans, versus what, normally the 16,300 is like inside Allen Fieldhouse. At the end of the day, though, 2 of these first 3 games, guys, in the Big 12 are home against top 15 opponents. You'd like to have that Allen Fieldhouse magic. It's just not going to happen this year when you can't have a full arena. How big of a detriment is that going to be for the Jayhawks, do you think?
If KU is a good team, it won't be a big deal. Good teams find a way to win. There's going to be enough people in there. And just from my perspective, from being in some gyms this year, watching games, if you have the right fans, you can get an atmosphere even if you only have 100 fans in the gym. That's all we've ever been allowed to have over at good old NU this year. So, the however many that they're going to allow to come in, if they can't make an atmosphere, that's on those fans.
Well, I'll look at the schedule, for the Jayhawks, and going back all the way to the very beginning of the season, they're 6-1 right now. So they played 7 games. They will end up, after the Texas game, they'll have played 10 games. And I'm going to do quick math here really quick. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 of those 10 games will be against ranked opponents to start the season. 6 out of 10. Now, I know Kentucky is not ranked anymore, but at the time they played them, they were in the top 25. So 6 out of their first 10 games will be against ranked opponents. That's absolutely baptism by fire for Bill Self's squad. So definitely a big way to kick off the season for the Jayhawks, and some big time basketball coming up in the next couple of weeks for the Jayhawks. That is our College Hoops Roundup here on Keeper of the Games. One final interview. We told you this show was jam-packed, full of content, and it absolutely is. We are super thrilled to welcome into the program Drew Kelso. He is with One Motive Sports, talking about his life as a sports agent. Thought it'd be a great conversation to have with him. So let's go ahead and get into that interview right now.
All right, we're welcoming on Drew Kelso, sports agent, basketball agent for One Motive Sports, doing a little something different with this interview than what you normally get with us. Gonna give you a little bit about Drew, life as an agent, what it's like, and he's got some other thoughts on the everything that's changing in the college world and in that landscape. But start off, Drew Kelso went to Southwestern with me, so we got a former mound builder here. Drew, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing, Weston? Good seeing you.
Yeah, we're doing great. So first, and I want to talk to you a little bit about this sports agent life. I think we probably have a lot of listeners, a lot of guys grow up thinking, hey, that's something that I would want to do. But you started your, professional life, I guess I'll say, doing something a little different. You were kind of known at Southwestern as the shoe guy, right? So tell us a little bit about your.
I was the shoe guy.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about you being the shoe guy, and then how you turned that into the career that you had there for a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me on. It's a cool opportunity. Always good seeing you, Weston. I don't think I've seen you since we were at Arrowhead and ran into each other.
That's right. That's right.
I ran smack into you. So, but no, the journey is kind of interesting. I was a basketball player myself. Played in college all 4 years. Went JUCO, and then I transferred to Southwestern Winfield as a junior. That's when I met you. And basketball has always been my background. I was actually a sports management major when I came to Southwestern. That was always my goal. And I'll touch on that a little bit. I've always wanted to be an agent. That was first and foremost. From the first, every agent that you talk to, 9 times out of 10 will tell you that they got their ambition or their spark from watching Jerry Maguire. So, for me as a kid, I saw Jerry Maguire when I was 10 years old, and I was like, man, actually, it's funny. I'm backtracking, but the first time I knew I wanted to be an agent, I was 13 years old, and I saw O.J. Mayo play for the first time. And I saw him do a 360 dunk off the tip at an AAU national tournament. Literally, ball came off, come down the lane, 360. I could barely touch the net. And I told my dad, I said, you know what? God made certain people to be in the NBA, and that's one, and I'm not. But I want to be the one that represents guys like that. So even at a young age, I always had that that mindset. I was always realistic with myself. I wanted to play college ball, of course, but I knew that I probably wasn't going to be good enough to go play in the NBA. So, but when I was at SC, I had it was weird, man. I got involved in the shoe world before that was really a cool thing like it is now. And started a business in my dorm room really my senior year when I transferred to Mississippi. Really trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. To be honest, I was kind of burnt out on basketball at that point. This was 2010. And started an entrepreneurship paper. And I wrote about I actually got the idea from a TV show called American Pickers. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that show.
Oh, yeah.
Sure,
Where
yeah.
they drive around and buy antiques and stuff like that. And I got the idea from that. And I was saying, well, I can do this with shoes. So I could go, because I knew Nike outlets and stuff like that had stuff that were way cheaper in the store than they were online, because I was such a avid shoe guy. And I knew what the prices of everything was. I said, well, if I'm buying these shoes, I might as well make some money at it too. So I wound up that, and I was a broke college kid, bought probably 3-4 pairs of shoes and flipped them on eBay. And I was like, I then turned 4 to 8, 8 to 16, and it just kept growing. And ran that. It was called Step by Step Sneakers. I ran that for about 8 years. Wound up pretty successful at it. We had a brick and mortar location here in Jonesboro, Arkansas, where I'm from. Did the online thing. We did wholesale all over the world. And but yeah, no. And then in 2018 is when we started OMS, and it's a long story. It was kind of a calling, more or less. I can get into that, but I won't go there. But it was just something I felt like I had to do, and it was one of those things I just laid it all on the line and went for it. I knew nothing about it. I knew I've got a couple friends in the NBA. I've got a couple guys that play high level overseas that I played with growing up. But as far as, overseas basketball goes, other than knowing guys that played there, I didn't know any coaches. I didn't know any GMs. I've never been to Europe. And that's what, and people laugh all the time, because I've got, right now, our company, we have right about 45 guys overseas, almost all in Europe. And, they'll ask me, okay, where are your connections and where have you been in Europe? I've never been to any of them, me or my partner. So it's a lot of, and I'll get into that later, but it's a lot of hard work. We've been open a little over 2 years now. So it's far from where we want to get it, but that's where we're at right now. So I'm pleased with where we're at.
And I want to ask you about OMS, about One Motive Sports, but before we get there, so what did that look like to actually become an agent? And I know you kind of told us about your transition, but once you made that decision, you're like, all right, we're going to do this. What did you have to do, and what did you decide to do to really help yourself be successful and get to where you guys are, 2 years after starting?
Yeah, great question. We had no idea what to do. The first thing we had to do was, we started November 2018, so it was kind of a weird timing, and it was more so, like I said, a calling. Me and my partner, Thomas Sandlin, that lives here in Jonesboro, my lifelong best friend. We've been the closest thing I have to a brother. And we started it up together, and we knew that, okay, the basketball season was already started, so we probably had to get guys that were we had to focus on recruiting, and I grew up in a household where my dad was my AAU coach. So I grew up around recruiting a little bit. I knew through him college coaches. So I'm like, okay, look, we got to probably start NAIA D2 level. We're probably not, if I go and knock on the door at somebody at KU, I'm probably not going to get them. Who's going to listen to me right now, right? So at that level. So, we started real small. I mean, and the only way I know how to do things is head first, and probably, and guys laugh at me in the business that I'm colleagues with. And they're like, we spent a year or 6 months traveling Europe and, making these connections before we ever sign a player. And then you just start signing all these random guys. And, before you know it, you got players all over. So, I mean, for us, it was, man, waking up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning every day, getting up, Facebook messaging the heck out of people, cold calling people, getting left on red a lot, and asking questions, just asking around. I didn't have any way to get to those people really, other than just social media and trying to see what they were looking for as far as getting guys. I only had the 2018-19 season was our first year. We had one guy that went overseas at all. And then that spring is when we started signing players. Like for real, like we had a few guys that were out of college already, all of that. But that 2019 recruiting class is when we really got things going. And last year, 1920 we had, I know when COVID hit, we had 39 guys in 27 countries. And now we've got about 45 in about 28 countries. So, I mean, it's been a transition for sure. And I'm sure we'll speak on it, but this year has definitely been challenging. It's I feel like we've made a lot of progress, but it could be a lot better if it wasn't for COVID. But that's everybody in the world with any business. So,
hey, Drew, here's a question for you. Actually, it's kind of
absolutely.
Fun. When Weston first kind of brought you up about being on the podcast, I was like, "Is that the shoe guy?" I think I know the shoe guy. But here's my question about the landscape right now. What does that look like? Right. I mean, if you're a high school player, even a middle school player, you're a kid. Your goal, your dream is to play in the NBA, right? Like that's what you want to do. But I don't think a lot of the general public know about all of the different avenues that are out there for players to be able to play professionally. I mean, you can obviously go overseas, but what does that landscape look like right now? I mean, what are the different avenues that players can take if they want to continue to play the game that they love after college?
Great question. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, the NBA is what we got 350, 375 guys in the NBA, and then you got the G League that's got, if we have a G League this year, that is about around that number. So, I mean, the realistic chances are slim. I hate to be that guy that's like, you can't. People told me I could never be a sports agent, and here we are. So I can't sit here and say you're never going to be an NBA player. But the chances are low. So I think nobody lays their head when they're 15, 16 years old, lays their head on their pillow at night and says, man, you know what? I want to go play in Kosovo when I get done out of college. Nobody does that, right? So I think when you get a little bit older, right now, when you ask right now, it's kind of a jaded question because obviously right now we've got so much other stuff going on, especially college kids that are in school, whether they want to take the extra year eligibility or they want to transfer, whatever the case may be. I mean, obviously taking the right steps. I mean, finding the right fit. I've always been a believer that if you're good enough, somebody will find you, and that's kind of the motto we've took. I mean, we've got guys from Power 5 schools all the way down to Christian college schools that are below NAIA. So we've kind of got everything in between. And obviously the Power 5 type kids are going to get more looks and coming out initially. But I think just finding the right fit for yourself. I think that's the biggest thing, whether it's, in high school, what AAU team you're going to play for. In college, what college do you go to? If you're not a D1 player, so what? Go to a D2, go to an NAIA. That's what we did. So, I mean, you have to find the right avenue for yourself. And when it comes to picking an agent, you have to find somebody that aligns with you. I mean, I respect Rich Paul and those guys a lot, but the average player can't be represented by those guys. They have to find somebody that's going to work for them and going to take their best interest at heart. So, I mean, I think it just depends on what you're trying to do. But, I mean, I think the high school kids right now that have dreams of NBA, I mean, you just have to really grind, or if you want to go overseas, even if you just want to play and say, tell your kids one day that you're a pro, there's very few of those guys out there. And you have to really, really just dig in and grind. As politically correct as that sounds, that's just what it is.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because my follow-up question to that is, what sort of role do you as an agent play with a lot of these players? I mean, I think
All right.
a lot of them are probably thinking, yeah, it's going to be like a Jerry Maguire type situation, or
for sure.
I think of like Scott Boras, in
yeah.
and all that, and negotiating the $1 billion contracts with the
Not like that
Lakers and all of that. What's your role like with the players that you do represent?
Oh my God, where do we start? I mean, at first, obviously the initial is the recruiting stage, and I mean, it's what I love. I love recruiting. I think that was something that I was really, I had dreams I had thoughts of being a college coach too, just because I love the recruiting aspect so much. It's very difficult, I mean, to convince a kid and their family that they need to sign with you, as opposed to, it's so competitive. The market's so competitive, and trying to, if you get a Division I kid that averages 7.8 points a game at a Big Ten school, you're going to go against 20, 30 different agents, at least. And that part's tough. But the role for me after we get them in, and my partner, is I'm 31 years old. So I feel like, 90% of our clients are 25 years old and younger. So it's an exciting time for us because we have such a young core, but it's also a very, very much of a headache. Great kids. I call them all kids because they're 22, 23 years old, and I'm 31. And, I feel like I live a totally different life than they do. But, I think the biggest thing is just being there for them, and I always said that we were going to be different in the fact that, we really look after these kids' best interests, and agents kind of get that negative connotation a lot. You think about guys like Drew Rosenhaus and all those guys that are making millions and millions of dollars, and they kind of got that persona about them, like they show up in a suit, got slick back hair, and they're driving a Ferrari. That's not me, man. I work out of my man cave at home, and I'm living in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas, and I'm the normal guy, and so is my partner, and so I think trying to defeat that and relate to these guys is huge, first and foremost. I always tell people my job as an agent is almost 4 parts, and I don't know which one is. They're almost equal parts. Number one is you got to be a recruiter and a talent evaluator. I got to be able to go to a game and tell you that kid's a pro and he can play at such and such level immediately, and I think he can be here in 5 years. That's number one. Number two is you have to be you have to find deals. I mean, you got to be a job placer. You got to be able to connect. You can recruit all the players you want, but if you can't get them on a team, then it doesn't matter. Number three, you have to be a social worker. You have to deal with all of their stuff that comes with it. And right now, I think a lot of guys, and I love them all to death, but a lot of their true colors are coming out with COVID because it's such a tough time for everybody. And then number four is in my world, it's not as streamlined as the NBA as being a bill collector. You hear stories about guys not getting paid, agents not getting paid. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it definitely happens. So I think those 4 roles right there is my most important thing. But the biggest thing is just being there for the guys and being I feel like I'm a big brother or father figure for some of these guys right now.
Obviously, with everything going on, your business model is highly dependent upon things being open, about leagues playing. And I am certainly not up to date on what all of the European or, there's a lot of different continents around the world where they play professionally and where guys can make a living, whether it be, a meager, or some places you can make a very comfortable living playing basketball, even though it's not the NBA. I know that Marshawn Blackman, a former Newman Jet, is with you. And I know that so I wanted to ask you, what is your biggest challenge right now, knowing that you've got guys who have just come out of college who are looking for work and probably would have work if not for the pandemic? What's been the biggest threat to those guys, and your biggest challenge trying to navigate these unprecedented job and economic situations that these basketball leagues find themselves in?
Great question. You threw a perfect example in there with Marshawn. Marshawn averaged 17 and 9 last year at the D2 level. Normally, that's a guy that's an easy sell. Right now, we're still waiting. I think I know he'll get something eventually. But a guy like that, or a guy, not just him, a lot of guys. There's a lot of good players still sitting out there that are left. I was reading an article the other day from one of the biggest agencies in Europe talking about how many great players are still sitting around the world waiting on a job. But the biggest misconception with overseas, and you kind of touched on it. I've got guys making hundreds of dollars a month, and then there's guys overseas making, it's jaded because it's tax-free money. You're getting your living paid for. They might be 22 years old, and you get to go live in Europe, and you're getting all your expenses paid for, and you put a little bit of money in your pocket and hope that you can move up, right? And there's guys overseas making millions. And the biggest thing is, a lot of these teams overseas at a mid-level and low-level, even high-level, they don't have NBA money. They don't have that major backing. So if you don't have fans, that's a huge loss for the club, right? If you don't have, and I know you probably guys have seen European jerseys where they've got 1 million sponsorships on their jerseys, right? So, and if there's no fans, guess what? There's no sponsorships, and why would a team sponsor somebody if nobody can be? It's not like the American guys are going to go buy their product. They got to appeal to the audience that's there. And so, the teams have taken huge pay cuts. Depending on the level of play you're at, you're talking 50 to 80% across the board. So that's the biggest thing right now. And I had a GM about a month ago break down to me, and we were really trying to get a guy there that was in the States. And he said, if we bring him in, it's from Montana. He said, we bring him in from Montana, fly him here, and we get him here for a month. We pay for his housing. We pay for his visa. We pay for yada, yada, food, car, everything else. And the league shuts down in a month. Guess what? We're screwed. We lost a lot of money on this deal. And so a lot of these teams right now, and guys don't understand this, and it's hard to explain this to a 22, 23-year-old kid, that the financial side of it, that's the biggest challenge. It's not lack of leagues. You name a country, they've got a basketball league. About 95% of in Europe especially, 95% of the countries over there have a somewhat reputable league that you can make a living in, whether it be a meager or extravagant living. But, the biggest thing is just financials, man. It's just, they don't have public, and I have guys complain all the time, we don't have a trainer on staff. We don't have this, we don't have that. Yeah, it's not a publicly funded university or private, where people at Southwestern are paying $30,000 a year to go to school there, so, so they don't have that. So of course they don't have those people on staff. You have to really grind it out to get to that level and get to the place where you want to go, and you got to really love it. But that's the biggest challenge right now.
What would you say are the, I don't know, I'll just throw out top 5, most respected leagues outside of obviously the NBA and G League that, and I'll ask the question, it can be either most profitable or, it's really respected because it really gets guys, to other places.
Right. And that's a great question. And the NBA has international scouts everywhere. You look at a guy like Pat Beverly. Pat Beverly went overseas and played 5 years before he ever touched an NBA court. There's a lot of guys like that are making that transition. They go to Europe, and people think just because you're going to Europe, you can't be seen. No. They have what they call international cups, kind of like soccer. You got Champions League. The biggest league in the world is EuroLeague. That's like Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, and they play internationally. Like Shane Larkin's over there right now making millions of dollars a year. That was with the Mavericks. Guys like that. But domestic leagues, other than you have EuroLeague, Euro Cup, Champions League, some leagues like that. But probably Spain, of course, ACB Spain, huge. And they have 5 divisions in Spain, but top division Spain. Probably Greece, Italy, top division for sure. Turkey's getting really big right now. There's a lot of money in Turkey. The next, probably Germany, Russia, places like that. So, European countries for sure. But, if you get in one of those leagues, you're doing really well for yourself. I mean, EuroLeague guys are easily making $250,000, $500,000, million plus. It just depends on who you are if you're an American. And there's limits on how many Americans you can have per team, and it depends on the league. You know, like in Spain, top division, they can only have 2 Americans on the team. Everybody else has to be European or Spanish, pretty much. So it's a very tough environment to get to that level. Very, very. You have to you got to be a really big name coming out of college to get to there, or you just really have to grind it out and get there. I mean, and like a place like China, where you've seen guys like Stephon Marbury and Jimmer Fredette and guys like that go, those are usually ex-NBA guys that they can pay millions of dollars for because those teams are so wealthy, you know. So those are the best ones right now.
Hey, Drew, by the way, I didn't really need a reminder that I paid $30,000 a year to go to Southwestern. But
hey, I went there for a year, man. So I don't know what it was. I got sold on it, and I went because I came from a full ride JUCO scholarship to going to Southwestern. So that was a big change for me and my family for sure. Yeah, no, I had to throw that in there. I don't know why that came to my mind.
No, it's all good. Hey, we would be remiss before we let you go to not get your thoughts on a couple of the big news items that are happening in the world of collegiate athletics, you know, especially collegiate basketball. And this just happened today where the NCAA approved the blanket waivers for all transfers immediately. So any transfer right now can go and play at another school without setting out. You know, I know that
I just heard this like 2 hours ago. I mean, I heard rumors, but I just heard it like crazy.
I know you're dealing with, you know, college students. I know you're dealing with, you know, the guys that are just getting ready to, or just graduating, just, you know, they've used up their eligibility. They're going to the next step. What does that mean for you and in your industry for players that may end up having an extra year of eligibility, or, you know, maybe they're going to transfer schools or going to try to explore other options at the collegiate level?
Yeah. It's a question that we throw around every day. You know, like I said, recruiting has been the backbone of this company for the last 2 years. And, you know, now I think we have 68 clients right now. So we've got a lot of guys, and it's basically 3 of us that are manning it. You know, so we're at that point now where, okay, we got to be a little more selective. But at the same time, you know, being selective to a very select amount of guys that are even trying to leave school, you know, is a tricky part, you know, and, you know, we're trying to get into the higher level guys, the guys that might have a chance to make the NBA, guys that going to be very high level overseas guys to go with our core that we have now. But even with those guys, if you're not a bona fide NBA player right now, I mean, I've talked to college coaches this year that have said, you know, people almost look at you crazy if you don't take the year, you know, and I think the biggest thing for me, and that just proves it even more, is I've been calling it, like, college basketball is literally about to become the Wild Wild West. You know, it's literally about to become the Wild Wild West because now you're letting guys transfer during season. How does that look on their academic side where, okay, does their credits transfer? Are we even worried about school anymore? You know what I mean? And people don't think about that. But, you know, I was talking to I won't say the school, but I was talking to a high major school one day about a month ago. And he said, man, we told our assistant coach he's the new GM of blank, blank college. And, you know, I mean, because if you look at a school, I mean, you guys are in Kansas. I'm trying to think, you know, for me, you know, I live in a town. I live in Arkansas. We have some mid-majors like Arkansas State, Central Arkansas. I mean, you think about a school like, you know, Missouri State, just throwing examples out. They're becoming breeding grounds for these high major programs to come and pick. And the kids that are really getting screwed out of this deal, for lack of better words, are high school kids. High school kids are, because there's no waiver in high school. You can't take an extra year of high school eligibility. Yeah. So, you know, and that's probably the biggest thing for us is like, you know, I could be recruiting a kid, and we're recruiting some right now, but it's very limited compared to what it has been, because normally, I mean, I'll recruit a kid from October all the way until they decide to sign in the spring, whether that be with us or somebody else. But right now, it's like, if I start recruiting a kid and they tell me in March, April, May, whatever, you get a report with their family, their coaches, whoever, and they sit here and they're like, you know what? I really appreciate everything, Drew, but I'm going to go ahead and go back to school for another year. I'm a grad transfer to KU. What can you do? You wasted time.
Right.
You know, and so I think for us, that's the biggest thing is like, we don't really know what to expect. And I have a feeling that there will be less guys, and I don't really have a bit of advice for those guys. It just depends on your situation, what fit it is for you. I think most kids will stay. They'll stay or they'll take that extra year somewhere else. You know, I mean, unless you're, like I said, a high level player, you just really hate school, or you need the money. You know, and I think that's I think everybody else will kind of stay. So I think the waiver rule at Christmas blows my mind though. That's like, I can see, like, my first college game about 2 weeks ago down in Alabama. It was my first game I've been to since COVID happened. And it was just surreal. It was really surreal seeing the lack of fans, for one, how spaced out everything was. Like, it just didn't feel right. Like, just something about it didn't feel right. Yeah. And I know Coach K, I heard that, read that article where he was talking about he really questioned the NCAA's, decision on keeping playing. But now you're letting kids just leave in the middle of the season. So can they, I'm asking, I guess I didn't read the full article. So if you've got a kid at KU and he wants to transfer to K-State, he can do that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, the blanket waiver, and I do want to point out that it's only in effect, I think, for just this season, and then they'll revisit it post and see if that's something they want to do permanently. But yeah, I mean, they're approving blanket waivers from one D1 school to another for all sports effective immediately. It does not apply to any players that want to go like D2 to D1. That's not part of it. It's only in that division. But yeah, as far as I know, it's just kind of like you said, it's kind of the wild, wild west is kind of what it's.
It really is. And I think like it's only going to get worse. Well, I'm hoping after this year, and I can see why, because you look at a school like Gonzaga that's number one in the country, and you guys saw how, if you're a KU guy, like you see how good they are. Yeah. They played 3 games. They played 3 games because of this. If you're a senior on that team, like, that's not how you want to go out. Like, that's not how, and so at first I was really against the rule of getting the extra year, but now I get it. I think it hurts a lot of kids, but it also helps a lot of kids too. And
so one thing of clarification, just so we're on the same page, the transfers do already have to be enrolled full-time at the school they are transferring to, and it has to be their first transfer from a 4-year school, and you have to be leaving your old school in good standing, so you have to be academically and not being, not facing disciplinary action, but just so everybody's on the same page. You already have to be at the school.
Wow. It's wild, man. I just feel like we're making up rules as we go. I just put it that way. I think that's life right now, though. I think we're all making up rules as we go. Like,
I think I was just going to say real quick, I think on this podcast, Tommy particularly has expressed many times he thinks the NCAA is just making up rules as they go. So I think that fits perfectly.
Hey, whatever makes money, man. I think that's it. I probably shouldn't say that, but I think that's their mindset, is whatever makes money and can say, think about the NCAA tournament last year. What horrible timing could that have happened for them to lose billions? I'm talking billions of dollars off the NCAA tournament. Whatever their revenue normally is off the NCAA tournament. I was getting ready to hit the road for like 2 weeks, and I had a restaurant. I was at a Mexican restaurant, and I saw the Thunder game get canceled all in Spanish. And I was like, I knew it was bad enough. Like, I knew enough Spanish to know that we were in trouble. So, so it's been crazy, man. I really feel for the kids, like the college kids, though. I really feel like, all this aside, like, no one wants to play a game in an empty gym. No one wants as a player, like, I've been there. I mean, I played at small colleges and nobody cared enough to go to the games. And I've played AAU where it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and those are in an empty gym, and those are the worst games. I can't imagine being a high major Division I player and having to play in an empty gym. And, you talk about the Division II and NAI. I think that's probably where it hits home the most for me, is like a kid, like at NAI school. Yes, they're getting the extra year too. NAI went ahead and followed suit later on to go ahead and grant that extra year. But a lot of kids can't afford that. They can't afford that extra year. They don't want to take out another year of student loans. So, I mean, it is what it is. But I think we're all just trying to hold on. I think that's just life in general. I think we're all just trying to survive it and hopefully, make something from it.
We're all just trying to hang on. That's kind of the
that's motto.
Yeah,
the Chiefs. I know I'm in Arkansas. I'm a diehard Chief fan. Weston knows that. So
Yep.
I said the Chiefs won the Super Bowl and the world went to hell after that. So
there you go.
That's
Exactly.
That was the greatest thing. That was the greatest thing in 2020. Everything else has been just crazy. So.
There you go. Hey, Drew, before we let you go, if people want to find out more about your agency, they want to look you up online, where can they do so?
Absolutely. OneMotiveSports.com, just like one, it's all spelled out, ONEMOTIVE sports.com. And then the same at One Motive Sports on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everything like that. So, I mean, definitely we're pretty active on promoting our players and stuff like that. That's what it's all about. So any questions I can ever ask for anybody, please don't hesitate.
Sounds good. Well, best of luck to you and the agency
Hey, I
in
appreciate
the
y'all.
upcoming year. And thanks so much for being on, man.
I appreciate y'all. Thanks, man. I appreciate
Thank
you
you
guys for having me.
That's Drew Kelso. Want to thank him for being here on Keeper of the Games for our holiday extravaganza. You guys tired yet? Or are you still hanging on? You still good to go?
I mean, we're fading slightly. I mean, I didn't get my cardio in today. I needed a warm up, needed a stretch or something for this.
I mean, Weston, I
Yeah.
see you over there. You're starting to like close your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, look, dad life is really catching up with me. I am, it's what we're recording right now and it's closing in on 10 o'clock. I'm usually under the covers at this point, or maybe, in the rocking chair. That's about my life at 10 o'clock. But hey, we'll battle through. We got to do the Christmas extravaganza. Got to just situate up the old Surfing Santa Hawaiian Christmas shirt and let's finish this thing out.
Yeah, if you're listening to this right now, I'm sure that you're probably like, when is the show going to be over? You guys are talking forever. Our goal, and I'll say this again at the end of the show, our goal is like not for you to listen to this whole thing in one sitting. We wanted to give you enough content that will last you through the next couple of weeks while we are off the air. That's why we're doing this holiday extravaganza. We've got a few more topics to get to before we wrap up our program. No more interviews. We wrap that up with our interview with Drew Kelso. Again, thanks to Drew, to Clint, and to Jason for joining us here on Keeper of the Games. But we're going to talk just a little bit about college football. The season is over for both Kansas State and the University of Kansas. It was over for the University of Kansas 2 weeks ago as they canceled their final game
the first
against.
week, it was over.
Well, that's
The
true.
first week it was
That's
over.
true. But they canceled their final game against the Texas Longhorns. But it is officially over for the Kansas State Wildcats as the Wildcats announced they will not seek a bowl bid. They are ending their season at 4-6. They were eligible for a bowl game, but they are the first Big 12 team to opt out of playing in a bowl game. They told the Big 12 conference they do not have enough players to prepare for and play in a bowl game, and that they're pausing football activities following COVID-19 test results. It's been a roller coaster up and down ride for the Wildcats this season. And Weston, you and I kind of recapped the season last week after they lost, and I believe that they had lost their final 5 games in a row or something like that to end the season for the Wildcats. But this was a team that was 4-1 at one point. We were talking about, could they perhaps win the Big 12? Could they perhaps, do really special things this season? They faded towards the end, and they've had a couple of different times encounters with COVID-19, and this is the most recent one. So how would you put a bow, and Blake, I'll start with you. How would you put a bow on this Kansas State Wildcats season, especially knowing that they're not going to be playing in a bowl game, that they are not going to seek a bowl bid, and this is it for the second year of Chris Kleiman in Manhattan?
I mean, I think that if you're a 4-6 team, you probably don't deserve to be in a bowl game. Defensively, Kansas State, in my mind, that's kind of where things fell down a little bit. They had some injuries on the offensive side, but you look at the offensive numbers for their teams. They got outpassed by nearly 900 yards this year. They got outrushed by about 230 yards this year. So defensively, I think that's where Kansas State kind of missed out on this year. Loved what you saw out of Deuce Vaughn, loved what you saw out of Will Howard, but Howard never really made the strides in the passing game this year that I think the Kansas State Wildcat fans were hoping for. Only averaged 130 yards per game passing in this era of college football. That's not good enough. Only completed 54% of his passes, 10 interceptions, only 8 touchdowns. There's a lot more growth that I think right now, after looking at the whole season in totality, you have to wonder if Will Howard is going to be good enough to be your guy. Obviously, with the Skylar Thompson injury, that was a big problem for Kansas State this year. Is it a give back year? I think it's a give back year for football too. Are they
Yeah.
using eligibility? Yeah. So does Skylar Thompson come back? Is he going to be the guy? Do you kind of mortgage your future to bring back this aging quarterback? Who knows what Skylar Thompson's going to do, but defensively for Kansas State, didn't play good enough, and quarterback play was not good enough, but there are some positive things to look forward to. Deuce Vaughn is certainly at the top of my list of guys, the leading receiver, leading rusher. You have both those guys in one player. That's pretty exciting.
There are definitely some guys to keep our eyes on this Wildcat squad in the years to come. And I think it's a testament to Chris Kleiman and his skill as a coach and what he brings to the table to keep the team together the way that he was able to. I know that there were some distractions throughout the year. There were some players that left the team, and it was, clearly a frustrating year with COVID and with all the different, distractions and everything going on. But at the end of the day, to finish 4-6 when your starting quarterback is out for the season. I know the team lost 5 games in a row to end the season. I know that they're not going to a bowl game, but I don't think all is lost in Manhattan. We've talked about that quite a bit. Weston, your thoughts on the fact that K-State will not be going to a bowl game?
Yeah, kind of reiterate on the other thing. I think that really the only downfall or negative to them not going to a bowl game, is that you would like to get these young players that we're all kind of saying, hey, be excited about that experience. But, I don't even know how much experience you'd really get out of that in the way this year's going, with just the absurdity of everything that's happening. I'm not sure what value that experience would actually give. So I think not going to a bowl game is not a big deal, but I do want to touch real quick. I think it's something Blake mentioned is interesting, and kind of what happens with Will Howard with potential return of Skylar Thompson, but then also, and I think the commitment happened a while back, but obviously National Signing Day was today, I believe, or was it yesterday? I've kind of lost track. But 4-star quarterback Jake Rubley did officially sign with Kansas State, and I know they're very, very, very excited about having him in Manhattan. So he may be one of those guys that, they have expectations of him stepping in immediately and being the guy. Now, granted, if Skylar Thompson is returning, and I'm not sure where we left off on exactly whether that's possible or not, but he's the guy. I mean, they're not going to say no to Skylar Thompson returning. I would be certain on that. But lots to, in my opinion, to be excited about. For Wildcat football, a lot of youth that you saw that you were excited about. Disappointing to hear that, and good for him, but disappointing as a Wildcat fan to hear that Wyatt Hubert, defensive sack extraordinaire, did announce today that he will be declaring for the NFL draft, and absolutely that's the right decision for him. If you can go get drafted, go get drafted. But obviously a disappointment as Wyatt would have had one more year in Manhattan. So overall, I think you got to be excited about the youth in the continued growth of this program under Coach Kleiman.
Yeah, a great segue, as you mentioned, Jake Rubley, as the early signing period was on Wednesday, and the Wildcats got some pretty big signings. You mentioned Rubley out of Highland Ranch, Colorado. He was rated the 25th best overall prospect in America and the number 3 pocket passer in the nation, which is big. Offensive lineman Andrew Linegang out of Bismarck, North Dakota. He signed with the Wildcats on Wednesday. He was viewed as the 10th best center in the nation by 24/7 Sports. Gavin Hazelhorst, who is right down the road from Manhattan and Hayes, which I guess Hayes is not down the road, but it's in the state, which always an in-state signing is big. He signed with the Wildcats. He was ranked 22nd among all inside linebackers in the nation by 24/7 Sports. And Devontae Pritchard out of Gardner, Kansas, another in-state signing for Chris Kleiman's crew. He's going to play linebacker. He was rated the 43rd best safety in the nation by Rivals. And those are just a handful of some of the early signees for the Wildcats. They brought on 8 players on defense and 6 on offense. Obviously, the main signing period begins in February, but for the Wildcats to get this caliber and this number of players to sign early like they did is good news for the Wildcat squad, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean,
To be honest, go ahead if you have. Go ahead, Weston. This is my very quick thoughts on signing day. It doesn't matter. Signing day does not matter. Let me know when kids show up and they strap it on or they get on the court. I don't care what they did at Lyndon B. Johnson High School. Okay, I don't care unless you're LeBron James and you're going straight to the NBA. It doesn't matter. So give me 5-star recruits. Give me 1-star recruits. It does to me. It doesn't matter. I don't pay attention to National Signing Day. It doesn't. I don't know what KU's class was ranked. I don't know what Kansas.
We're going to
State's
talk
class
about
was
it.
ranked. Huh?
We're going to talk about it.
I mean that's fine for me. I don't know a thing about their recruits, and honestly it doesn't matter because we've seen KU bring in guys who were not thought of as being ranked very highly under Mark Mangino and achieve things that the program has never achieved before. And we've seen people like Charlie Weiss and Les Miles bring in guys who are ranked very highly, and we got Squadouche to show for it. So to me, it doesn't matter.
Your opinion on the K-State signees, Weston?
Yeah, I couldn't be any more opposite than Blake on this opinion because I've been on record saying that, truly for the continued growth of the program, the only thing that matters is recruiting and signing these kids. Now, I don't know if this is part of what you meant, Blake, but I do think there's some too. I mean, these days you sign a letter of intent. That doesn't mean anything until you show up because, guys can go other places and those kind of things. They back out of these letters all the time for a multitude of reasons. But ultimately, majority of those guys that sign the national letter of intent show up on campus in recruiting. I mean, college is so much more. This is so much more important than the pros, where everybody's good in the pros. College, there is there is often a humongous disparity in talent from one program to the other. So to gain the players, and yes, it has to convert into something tangible, those wins, that production on the field, but getting talent into the program is one of the most important things you can do as a college coach right now. So good for Kansas State, to see these levels, and really good. I think good for the state of Kansas as a whole. I think, and maybe this, I don't know, I have nothing to back this up, but I think elevating the Kansas State program should help really the Big 12 as a whole, and in turn help, Kansas. So I think this is a win for everybody here.
Well, speaking of Kansas, they did also have a bunch of new players sign with them on the early signing period. The two guys I think to keep your eyes on, obviously Devin Neal, everybody's talking about him, the hometown kid from Lawrence, the highest rated recruit that signed with the Jayhawks. I believe he's a 4-star running back.
Yeah, 4-star.
So, he signed with the Jayhawks. So definitely a guy to keep our eyes on. He also, my understanding is that he also signed with KU baseball today on Wednesday as well. So looks like he'll try to be a 2-sport athlete at the University of Kansas. And then also Ben Easters, who is a 3-star quarterback. He was the first one to sign with the Jayhawks, and he's enrolling early. We all know how desperate the Jayhawks are for a consistent quarterback. I don't know if Ben Easters is that guy or not, but clearly they are in need of some help at the quarterback position and just offensively in general. So I know that there are several other, high ranking recruits. And I think that if you're talking to Les Miles, he's going to tell you it was a pretty great early signing day for the University of Kansas. I then know if you talk to Blake Cripps, he's going to tell you it doesn't matter at all. But at the end of the day, there are a couple of players at least that are worth keeping our eyes on as we get into the spring signing period. Fingers crossed they stay with their commitment and then end up in campus and can contribute to this Kansas Jayhawks squad. There's really not much more to talk about with Kansas. They finished the season 0-9. One game that was even particularly close, and that was the Texas Tech game. So at the end of the day, Blake, I think my only point would be that we got to have something positive that we can hang our hats on. And if they can at least have a decent signing class, and at least we can say, all right, well, at least there's that. And it's not good enough, but at least it's something. That's just my opinion.
I don't disagree with what Weston's saying that recruiting is the most important part of college athletics. I agree with that. The thing is, like, analyzing what these guys are ranked right now by Rivals or Blue Chip or whatever ranking site you want to do is, for me, not worth my time. Talk to me after Labor Day when they've played a game and you can actually watch them against college competition. That's what I want to see. It doesn't matter how many yards they ran for in their rinky-dink high school league or wherever they played. And not to diminish high school sports. Love high school football, love high school sports. But, I don't care about, KU had how many times have we been told, KU's got a great football recruiting class this year. And they've won exactly like 2 games that season. So it doesn't matter, and not only that, just because you get a good recruit doesn't mean that you're not going to waste him. Look at Khalil Herbert.
Yeah.
He used to be a KU Jayhawk. I don't know how many stars he got, but we didn't keep him. He left, and this year he's one of the best running backs in the country for, I think, Virginia Tech. And Puka Williams, great recruit. Sure, he was worth a lot of stars, decided to leave in the middle of the season, and we didn't have him. So just because you got stars in your name in high school doesn't mean you perform at the next level. And it seems like people with stars at Kansas seem to underperform more than they do anywhere else on planet Earth that's playing football over the last decade. It's a weird coincidence how that happens.
I will say, and to that point, though, that to me, that's why recruiting classes are more important than a particular recruit. Because like you said, if you bring in, if Kansas next season brought in a 5-star talent, what's going to keep him around when he's clearly the best talent in the place? So having a full class, and then to your point though, what I think is incredibly difficult for anyone to do, and this is what separates, I think, great coaches and or recruiters from everybody else, is it's so hard to differentiate between a 1-star, a 2-star, and a 3-star. I think everybody can clearly look at a playing field and go, that kid is a 5-star recruit. I mean, like, he's going to be in the NFL. Like, he clearly stands out. It's not hard to evaluate that. It's hard to evaluate the 3-star, the 2-star, the 1-star. And that's where Kansas consistently has to recruit from, right? So that does make it difficult. And then evaluating a class based on 2 stars and 3 stars, to your point, that I do agree. That's incredibly difficult to assign that number and then ultimately put a value on a recruiting class based on that.
Well, to me, though, it doesn't really matter if it's a 1 or a 3-star. Look at what Bill Snyder did at Kansas State. He didn't do that with 4 and 5-star recruits. He built that program among guys that nobody else wanted, guys who were too short, guys that were too slow, and guys that couldn't play at the big level. And he almost won a national championship with that. Probably should have won a national, maybe should have won 2 national titles with that, but won a heck of a lot of games and kind of owned that school over in Lawrence. So to me, just because, when Mark Mangino was at KU, I don't think they had a single 4 or 5-star recruit in Mark Mangino's 8 years in Lawrence, not one. So, if you're Alabama, if you're Clemson, if you've got that system in place, sure, look at the recruiting class, make sure that you're getting your guys. But if you're KU, it doesn't matter. What are you going to do to develop whatever average star rating your class has? What are you going to do to develop them once you get them on campus and start working with them in spring ball? And how are you going to help them by calling plays, calling defenses, and making adjustments at halftime once you get into the regular season? And if KU continues to stink at both of those things, it doesn't matter if they've got all Barry Sanders coming in to play. They're not going to be any good.
It's kind of like, go ahead.
I only want to make one final point, because my final argument here is it does matter to some degree, because me, who coming out of high school was a 0-star, maybe a negative half-star recruit, clearly if you're bringing in a bunch of Westons to the Kansas football program, you're going to get smashed by anybody who's got the 2s and the 3-star.
KU gets smashed this year. It gets there in every game.
But here's the thing. The bottom line is that, the recruiting is obviously important. I mean, nobody's going to diminish that or discount that.
For sure.
You have to keep them at your school. And with the transfer rules, that can be a little bit dicey nowadays. You have to keep them there. You have to develop them into talent. Just because they're a 3-star out of high school doesn't mean that they'll be a 3-star or higher in college. And then you have to coach them well in the games. Like it's a multi-pronged approach. And, Weston, just a week ago, you were lamenting on this program, and I don't disagree with you, about Brent Dearman's play calling. You could be a 5-star recruit and have that shitty play calling, and it's not going to work for you. So at the end of the day, I am 100% in the camp of let's get excited about the new recruits and who they are and where they're coming from and what stars they are and where they're ranked. But it clearly doesn't stop there. And the University of Kansas is a prime example of that. So you have to take all of it into consideration. And, we've seen in the 2 years that Les Miles has been at the University of Kansas, he is an effective recruiter. Let's give him credit where credit is due.
Sure.
To have a garbage program like the University of Kansas and be able to get even the level of recruits that he's getting right now is an accomplishment in and of itself, but it doesn't stop there. He's got to develop them and he's got to coach them. And so far, we have not seen those other 2 points. And hopefully that improves and that changes in year 3 of the Les Miles era at Kansas. Did I sum that up okay for both of you guys? Does that you agree
I would
with
sign off
that?
on that. Sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. No,
I mean,
I'm on
Kansas
board.
State being good doesn't help KU though, or else KU should be better than it is right now.
Fair enough. Well, at the end of the day, the Jayhawks finished the season 0-9. The Wildcats ended the season 4-6. No bowl games for either, and we've got some time until the next college football season officially kicks off in 2021. Very quickly, let's talk about the Kansas City Royals. One quick piece of news about the Royals from this week. The reliever Greg Holland is staying with the Royals. He signed a 1-year contract for $2.75 million last season in the shortened year for the Royals. He was 3-0 with 6 saves and a 1.91 ERA. He made 28 appearances, pitching 28 1/3 innings. It's got to be kind of a resurgence for Greg Holland. Early in his career with Kansas City, he was a 3-time All-Star. But we kind of talked about it, Weston, all the way back at the beginning of the season about how the Royals brought him back, and it was kind of a low-risk play for them. And he actually performed pretty well for Kansas City. He'll be returning to the Royals next season. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. My thoughts are the same as the Carlos Santana signing. I love having a very veteran, experienced guy to be able to coach up these young arms in the bullpen. While at the same time, you still will be expecting a nice level of talent out of it. And frankly, if that doesn't play out, it's a low risk move that doesn't stunt the growth of the youth of this franchise. So I love the signing. And then just from a fan perspective, always love having Greg Holland back. He was so important to that World Series run. So as just a fan favorite, glad to have him back in the blue.
Here's the most remarkable thing about Greg Holland is that he didn't permit a single run in his final 13 appearances. He pitched 13 1/3 innings, didn't give up a run to close out the season. So he definitely ended his season by proving that he was deserving of another 1-year contract to come back to Kansas City. And I thought it was really interesting, and Blake, I'll get your thoughts on him here too. Really interesting in hearing from him about why he decided to re-sign with the Royals, and just talked about how much he loves Kansas City and loved playing there and wants to stay with them, and hopefully the team can become a contender and a winner again. I think that speaks a lot for the faith that he has in the front office, the coaching staff, and the roster that they have put together.
Oh, absolutely. He was a bright spot for the Royals last season. It was great to see Salvador Perez come back after his injury and lead them in hitting, lead them in average. Obviously going to be a lot different in the outfield with Alex Gordon gone, but he is certainly, I hope, going to be someone out of the bullpen that the Royals can rely on. But, and you've accused me of this all day, of bringing up things that people don't want to hear. It's not going to help. If the Royals can't score runs, they're the 5th worst offense in the league, 4th worst on base percentage. Somebody's got to hit the ball other than Salvador Perez and Whit Merrifield, Jorge Soler. Jorge Soler's got to figure it out, and Bubba Starling, we got to figure out what they're doing with him, because offensively, Starling was bad.
Bubba's gone.
Yeah, he was bad last year. So, for the Royals, Hunter Dozier, underperformed. There's a lot of pieces in the offense from top to the bottom of the lineup that are either gone in the case of Alex Gordon or that underperformed last year. And so Kansas City's got a lot of things to try to figure out for the 2021 season, assuming that we get it played on time as more labor strife starts between the owners and the players.
Well, just a note, Bubba Starling is still with the Royals. I know, Weston, you said he's gone. He signed a minor league contract with the Royals to stay with them. So
I knew he got non-tendered. I didn't.
Yeah, they non-tendered him, but then he did sign a minor league contract to stay with the Royals. But to Blake's point, offensively, yeah, absolutely. They need to do better with the bat. I think that's a big reason why they did pick up Carlos Santana. Not the guitarist, by the way. I made that mistake last week. The baseball player, Carlos Santana, joining the Royals.
Love Greg Holland.
Yeah.
Good signing.
Great signing for sure. Holland in his career has 212 saves and a 2.90 ERA in 10 seasons. And that reliever position, the relief pitcher position, a lot of great relief pitchers have really high ERAs. And so it's, pretty impressive that Holland in his entire career has an ERA under 3. Pretty remarkable for him and the career that he's had. You would think that he'll probably end up finishing his career in Kansas City. So definitely a good signing, low risk play for the Royals. And that's our quick Royals update here on Keeper of the Games. And we would be remiss here on our holiday extravaganza, our final show of the year, and having Blake Cripps grace us with his presence on this program to not get a Newman University update from the voice of the Newman University Jets. So what is going on in the world of Newman University, and what would you love our listeners to know about going on with Newman?
Well, last home game of the first semester is coming up, and that will be on Saturday. It's a doubleheader as the Jets take on Central Oklahoma. Central Oklahoma, the women's team, has the premier center in the league, Kelsey Johnson, averaging 25 points per game and about 9 rebounds. They've lost 3 games in a row. The Newman women have played in some tight games this year. They're coming off of a loss to Fort Hays State, so trying to look to rebound. For Newman, on the other hand, the men last week got their first win over Nebraska Kearney, lost to Fort Hays State by 6 in overtime. So we talked a little bit about this on the Newman Jet podcast, the Jetcast, which is at newmanjets.com/listen. It just dropped at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, so you can go and check that out. That's available on Spotify as well, and you can also watch that on YouTube, just like this one. So after you get done with this marathon, you can go head over and click on that. But for the men, this is kind of a mind-blowing stat for the men. In all of their games that they have lost at home, they got blown out at Washburn. Washburn's a really good team. Their losses at home, every game has been within 1 possession in the last minute, and their losses are -3 to number 21 Missouri Southern, -2 to Pittsburgh State, and then a loss in overtime against Fort Hays State. So this is a team that is really close to being 4-1, and I'm betting they don't lose by 39 to Washburn if they have won one of those first 2 games, have a little confidence going up into Topeka. So Central Oklahoma's underperformed this year on the men's side. They started the year 0-3, so it's going to be 2 teams looking to get into Christmas break on a positive note. So that's where the basketball teams are. Only 8 get into MIAA Madness this year, so going to be a tough to get into that top 8, even in a normal year. And with coronavirus going on, whichever team handles that, whichever team stays healthy, that will determine who gets to play in Kansas City this year.
Blake, how does it feel to be back inside Fugate Gymnasium again?
It feels great to just be. I was praying that the girls and the guys would just get to play. And talking with Abby George on the Jetcast, 5th-year senior for the women's team, she said, God, there were so many times when we just didn't know if we were going to play, and we're just so happy that we get the opportunity to play. Each team has had a coronavirus outbreak. They lost their first game of the year to coronavirus to Pitt State, already got made up, haven't had any issues since then. Teams getting tested on a weekly basis. Those have all come back clean. The Newman campus is done. It's been weird being up on the track. It's been weird not having, we're limited to 100 fans and that's it. But the atmosphere has been okay. There's been parents that have come in. They've let the cheer and dance go up all around the outside. That's added to the atmosphere. But it has been different. But I'm getting to call games. I'm getting to watch basketball. So I'm, like I told the athletic director, we'll do whatever we got to do to make it work for this 1 year, and hopefully next year everything can get back to more of what we're considering to be normal.
I do think it's funny that that you mentioned once people are done listening to this marathon of a podcast to go over because I would venture to guess that anybody who sat through it's going to end up being over 3 hours of content with three of us will never listen to a podcast ever again. That's just
my listening to a book on tape at this point.
Yeah, that's just my gut reaction is that we have ruined podcasts forever because of this holiday extravaganza.
All right, and now moving to chapter 11, let's wrap this thing up.
We do have a couple more things to do, and that's just our final Wichita whip around of the year. And we have a couple topics to get to here on our Wichita whip around on Keeper of the Games. But we promise we won't be super long-winded about these topics, but we do want to get into at least what we're looking at least in the boys basketball world. And one of the things I want to make sure we do when we get back in January is to focus equally on boys and girls basketball. But for the sake of time, boys basketball will be kind of what we focus on here on this episode of Keeper of the Game. So only a couple of games in the City League of note over the last couple of days. Wichita South beat Cape and Mount Carmel at home. Final score of that game was 49-44. That was on the 15th. And then Derby beat Mays at home 67-59. That was on the 15th as well. Many other games are scheduled in week 3 that will be taking place this weekend. When you get into 5A, Valley Center beat Andover Central on the road 68-61. Salina South beat Mays South 56-48. And then in overtime, Andover beat Goddard Eisenhower 62-54. One interesting note about Andover is that I didn't realize until I started looking at the rankings, Andover is the number 1 ranked team in the state in 5A, which I feel like is it kind of snuck up on me. I didn't realize that Andover was ranked that high in 5A. They got a big win on the road in overtime against Eisenhower. So definitely some high caliber basketball being played there in Andover. I don't know how much you guys have paid attention to the early weeks in the boys basketball schedule around the Wichita Metro, but if you have any early season takeaways from any of these teams.
For me, it's been a little bit sad to see, and Joanna Chadwick talked about this when she was on the radio this week in Wichita, the fact that it seems like the talent is getting dispersed outside of the city limits. Because I really have a soft spot in my heart for the City League teams and wanting, the Wichita City League, the Greater Wichita Athletic League. From when I came down here from Nebraska, I mean, I had heard like, boy, this league is so good, and the players and the tradition and the teams and the fan support it's such a big deal. And when I got here and got to start calling games, I was like, yeah, this is a big deal. This is not like going up in Nebraska and covering 8-man football. It's just different in the City League for basketball. And I feel like a lot of these players that maybe previously had transferred into the City League to get to play in this league and have that statewide platform, now they're going to Derby. Now they're going to Andover. And, don't tell me about players don't transfer. Yeah, right. That's a fantasy at this point, okay? So, to me, that's the only negative that I have. God bless Andover. They should be doing everything they can to build up that program, just like Derby and all the other AVCTL schools are doing. But, for me, basketball is never going to quite be the same here in Wichita unless the City League has the premier players, the premier teams in the state of Kansas. And I don't know if they do right now. It's still really, really early to tell.
Well, and how about in 6A, the only school in the Wichita Metro, in fact, in this part of the state of Kansas, that is in the top 10 is Campus High School at number 4 in 6A. You've got Blue Valley Northwest at 1, Blue Valley North at 2, Lawrence at 3, Olathe South at 5, and then you get into the Shawnee Mission schools after that. So yeah, the only Wichita area school, even in the top 10, is Campus High School at number 4. Many more Wichita area teams represented in 5A. I mentioned Andover at 1. Mays is number 3. Cape and Mount Carmel is at number 4. Bishop Carroll right behind at 5. So definitely some more representation in 5A basketball, as it were. But yeah, just the overall talent level, I do agree with you. I mean, like you're looking at, these rankings and I don't see East High. I don't see Northwest. I mean, I don't see these
We're
City League schools. Where are they? They're just not there.
Yeah, it is sad, and a lot of those. Let's be honest here. A lot of those teams that you mentioned, a couple of those Olathe schools, the Hawks, they're always at state. I remember going to Cocorita; they're always there. I just plan on seeing the Blue Valley Northwest Huskies are always at state every single year. So they have Lawrence, Chesney Lions are always at state. So they've got really good teams up there in the northeast part of the state. The Shawnee Mission schools, on the men's side, at least, on the boys' side, they're not teams you always expect to see coming down to Cocorita to play. That's where some of those City League teams, Wichita South sneaks in, make some noise in the tournament because they play such a difficult, rigorous regular season schedule. But yeah, not seeing Wichita East, not seeing the Golden Buffaloes of Southeast up there. I don't like that. I don't like that. I want those teams to be good. I want those teams to be competitive. And, like I said, still a very early season. They can end up being really, really good.
Well, speaking of Cape and Mount Carmel, the other major news in the City League, in the Wichita Metro, when it comes to basketball, is that head coach and athletic director for Cape and Mount Carmel, John Cherney III, has announced his resignation effective immediately. So he's been on a temporary leave of absence for the last month, and it was 2 games into the 2020-2021 season for the boys basketball team as he stepped down. Blake, I know that you have spent a long time covering Capen. I know that you know that program quite a bit. You know that school quite a bit. And for a team that is currently ranked in the top 10 in state for 5A, that's definitely going to be a big change for Cape and Mount Carmel to move on from.
Be very difficult. Coach Cherney is a very, dominant personality. Have no inside knowledge about what happened or if this was a personal issue, behavioral problem, if he was just, I'm tired and I'm moving to Hawaii. I have no idea about anything. But what I do know is that he was a very, very analytics-based coach that had set up his team with these various staff programs and coached with the numbers. Is the next coach on his staff going to stay with that? Are they going to coach more by feel? I actually do know one of the assistant coaches who is on the sophomore team, and they've been just trying to keep the players insulated, trying to keep the players focused on the court, day-to-day business of practice, games, and not focused on what's happening with coach. Because I know that he has been very active in the Cape community, very active in terms of athletics overall, helping the football program, hiring Weston Sharts. That's going to be one of the lasting things of his legacy, is of how he'll be remembered, I think, is how that program and that hire turns out as they try to turn around Crusader football. But he's going to be tough to replace, and I know that everybody at Cape probably wishes that this was that this had not happened, that they didn't have to worry about this. But things happen. If mistakes are made, sometimes things have to be moved on. Coach Cherney was great to me, 100%. All the times that I worked with him as media, when I was covering football, he was fantastic to work with. So I have no complaints. That I can only speak to me, though. I like I said, don't have any inside information there. But yeah, that'll be a big adjustment for the Crusaders.
Jim Vanek, who is the current junior varsity coach, he's been elevated to head coach for the Crusaders. Cherney was hired back in 2011, led the Crusaders to a state championship, and since then reached 4 more state tournaments over 9 seasons in the head role at Cape and Mount Carmel. And then we're going to save our best for last here in our Wichita Whip Around. And I think, Weston, this might actually be the first time ever on the podcast, and it's fitting that it's our last topic of the entire year, that we've actually talked about like kids sports, like children's sports here on the podcast.
What?
I'm not sure that's ever happened. Can you think of another time that we've done this?
No, maybe other than just brief passings of like talking about tournaments and MAYB and that stuff in the context of coronavirus, but not actually directly talked about it.
So a huge shout out to the Wichita Cowboys youth football team. It's a 7th grade team. Their season was cut to an abrupt end, but they went to the American Football National Championship in Florida. They took 2nd place in that tournament, and now they're back in Wichita. AJ Bohannon is the head coach for the Wichita Cowboys. I'm looking at there was an article on KWCH about it, and here's the interesting thing. The very first line says, after tragedy brought the Wichita Cowboys youth football team season to an abrupt end, the 7th grade team got an invite to play in the American Football National Championship in Florida. Nowhere else in the article does it ever say what that tragedy was. I have no idea what happened to them. I have no idea why their season was given to an caused to an end. But at the end of the day, they took second in that championship. So hats off to the Wichita Cowboys youth football team. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. That's pretty cool though.
How about them Cowboys?
Back when I used to play for the Cougars in 7th grade, we used to absolutely wipe the floor with the Cowboys. They were a weak organization back in the day. We actually did play in the Wichita City League. That's where the league we played in middle school. That's it. That's all I have to add.
Yeah.
Wow. It's always about Weston, isn't it?
Yeah.
As much as possible, anyways.
That's true. I don't think that we can really get into like deep analysis of this. Nor did
I'd rather not, actually.
Nor did I think we would, but I do think that it is worthy of a shout out and a congratulations. Sure. So hats off to the Wichita Cowboys for that second place victory in the American Football National Championship. I had no idea there was even such a thing, but way to go and way to represent the Air Capital there. And I think with that, you guys, I think we got through our Marathon Holiday Extravaganza. And I know, like, I'm looking at the monitors right now. I can see both you guys. Blake, you look like you could go another 10 rounds. But Weston, you are fading quickly.
Oh God, guys. I think I had too much caffeine throughout the day. Peaked way too early. Plus, like I mentioned, it is my bedtime.
Yeah, you could have told me how long it was going to be, Tommy. I mean, I would have packed an energy drink. I could have medicated for this, and I would have been. I mean, I could keep going, but at this point, I mean, I think if Weston's ready to go, I'm ready to go too.
Hey, I sent you a rundown. You had every opportunity to look at how long.
Oh, I knew. I saw the rundown.
To be today.
I saw the rundown.
And I'd like it known for the record, it was not my idea to do multiple interviews.
That was a Weston
idea.
Well, and matter of fact, we actually even discussed, Tommy, off air that, hey, we could do these interviews, not that, we don't need to do them on the same day. We're going to kind of splice things together. And then, of course, all of our guests were available on Wednesday around the time we were recording. So it truly did create a 3-hour marathon recording for tonight.
I mean, honestly, should we look up what the world record is for the longest podcast?
I don't want to hold that record. That's embarrassing.
We might just be a couple hours away. I mean, why stop now?
Hey, I just know as we were like talking about the City League basketball scores, I'm looking at Weston and his eyes are just close halfway. Well, I'm like, we got to get out of here. We got to wrap this up.
Also, just to be frank, like I knew that I was not going to be able to add anything to that conversation. So even more, I was just kind of slipping out. I'll be honest. Hand up.
Hey guys. So I actually did look it up.
Yeah.
The world's longest podcast, 36 hours on April 21st and 22nd, April 2016. So, I mean, we only got 33 hours to go.
I don't think we should do it now, but I think we could actually do that sometime. Like, I think we got to have
a 37-hour nonstop podcast.
We got to have notoriety for something. It was always a goal of mine when I was a kid to actually hold a world record. So,
world record?
Yeah, I think we could do that. That's a piece.
How would we decide who got the plaque? Because if I don't get to have the plaque, then I'm out.
Well, you'd be in the book.
I don't want to be in the book. I want to have the plaque. I want to have the trophy.
Maybe the better approach would be to contact Guinness and see if we could get in the record books as like most hot take air horn uses in one episode. Like surely that's not even out there. Like maybe we could establish that record. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I like
and that will feature Blake heavily on that episode for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like we mentioned before, we've got a lot of stuff jam-packed in this episode, but the goal is to give you enough content to listen throughout the next few weeks before we come back in January. That's our plan, is to be back after the holidays are over with. And I mean, we're coming up on 1 year of Keeper of the Games in place. This is our 48th episode, so we're only a couple away from 50. I'll be honest, I didn't think we were going to get to 5. And so the fact that we are nearing 50 in 1 year and increasing listeners every week, increasing subscribers on YouTube every week and on the different streaming platforms is just incredible. So before we totally wrap up the show, any final thoughts from you guys about just the podcast in general, or the holiday season, or where we're at, or anything that you want to wax poetic about? The floor is yours, Blake. I'll start with you.
There's a lot of positive out there. You should try to find it. There's
I
a
like
lot
that.
of negative out there as well, but there's a lot of positive too. You should focus on that, not the negative stuff.
I like that. Weston, how about you?
Yeah, I'll just take a minute here, I guess, and I really just, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank everybody who's listened to us. Those of you who know us and you're listening just to be nice and get us some views. Hey, I appreciate that. Those of you who don't know us and have just found us entertaining and enjoyed our content and took it in, thank you so much. I mean, it's been, like Tommy said, no idea where this was going to go when we started. I don't know. I don't even think I was realistic that it would, even as we launched it, that we would be able to sustain it. And here we are, being able to finish almost a year's worth of podcast in a year when sports wasn't even being played, and yet people still listened. I mean, it truly is amazing, and I'm humbled by that people would still continue to listen. And as I listen to myself and hear stuff back, and I'm over critical of myself, thinking I don't know who would listen to this, but yet we still continue to increase in listeners. I truly am blown away and appreciative of all the support, all the downloads, all the shares, all the plays, all of that. I really do appreciate it, and looking forward to a lot more bigger, better content from Keeper of the Games in 2021.
If it makes you feel any better, Weston, the thoughts that you have about people listening to the show, I still don't know why people would watch the show.
Fair.
I do feel you on that one.
Absolutely. And so just a couple quick things from me before we get out of here. So echoing what Weston said about, just the podcast. Thank you for listening. If you've been a listener, if you found us 9 months ago or a week ago, really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what we have to say. We're idiots. I don't know why you would want to, but I'm glad that you did. I also want to thank our guests, the people that have been on the show throughout the last several months. Everybody from just friends of ours that we've pulled on that maybe have a little bit of knowledge in a certain world. I'm still blown away that we were able to get Jeff Goodman on the program, which was by far our biggest get, so far. But even guys like Gary Bedore from the Kansas City Star to join us, and Jason Malice tonight from the Wichita Thunder. We really appreciate all those people who have jumped on that have taken their time to be on a rinky-dink podcast with idiots. So I really, really appreciate that. Like Weston said, I think we've got a lot of really great things planned in 2021, and hopefully we can continue to grow, and hopefully you'll stick with us. The last thing I want to say, which is completely unrelated to the podcast altogether, but the holidays are a time to spread cheer and good times. So I'm proud to be on the board of directors for an organization called ICT SOS here in Wichita. And it's an organization that is all about fighting human trafficking, which is a huge issue in our world today, and even locally. And, before I joined the board, I kind of had this naive thought that, that sort of thing doesn't happen in a place like Wichita, and it certainly does. And so if you're in a charitable mood this holiday season and you're looking for an organization to support, the staff at ICT SOS, they do wonderful work in working with kids and adults that are survivors of human trafficking. It's a pretty terrible thing in our world today. And so they do great work in support and caring for and just giving resources to those people who are in need. So you can find out more about them at ictsos.com. And I thank you guys for giving me a couple minutes to talk about that. I really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, not a problem.
The best part about us giving our heart-filled thank yous and reached out at the end of this podcast is over under 2 people that actually make it all the way to this end of the podcast.
No, hey, and those 2 people.
I believe that the website is ictsos.org.
You're right.
Not .com.
You're right.
.org.
ICTSOS.org is the website. I misspoke on that, but would appreciate your support this holiday season. And those 2 people that stuck around to the end, God bless you. Thank you for sticking around. Want to remind you to hit subscribe. Yeah, I want to remind you to hit subscribe. That way, anytime we have a brand new episode of the podcast, you will get a notification. You can find us on platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all the major ones. You can find us right there and listen to us. Our website is COGSports, KOGsports.com. You can watch full episodes on YouTube and Facebook by searching for Keeper of the Games, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at COGPod. That's at KOG Pod. Blake, what is your Twitter handle?
At BE Cripps.
BE Cripps, BECRIPPS.
Yes, sir.
Weston, what is yours?
At WMills94.
You can follow me anytime at Tweets from Tommy. Hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. We will be back in January with a new episode of Keeper of the Games and to kick off 2021. For now, though, I am going to go not talk for a while. My mouth is getting really tired. For Blake Cripps and for Weston Mills, I'm Tommy Castor. You've been listening to Keeper of the Games.
Take care, guys.
You've been listening to Keeper of the Games with Tommy Castor and Weston Mills. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen on all major podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. Find the podcast and videos on Facebook and YouTube at Keeper of the Games, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at COGPod. That's KOG Pod.